We're not your family. Leave and go back home. On our road trip with my husband, Joseph, and his parents, we pulled over at a rest stop. Stepping out of the RV, Joseph surprised me with these hurtful words. What? Wait, what did you say? It felt like he was someone else entirely, not the caring husband I knew. Seeing my shocked expression, the three of them smirked, and Joseph started driving the RV away. I couldn't believe it. They wouldn't leave me stranded out here. In a panic, I dialed a number, hoping for help, but my mother-in-law's response left me speechless. Did you really think you were coming with us? How audacious. Please don't make a scene and come back. I was excited about our trip. Sorry, but we can't turn back on the highway. And remember, you're not really family, you're just my son's wife. It's time you understood that. We're going to enjoy ourselves without you. As the call abruptly ended, the RV shrank into the distance until it vanished from sight, leaving me stunned. The words, "You're not really part of our family," stabbed deep into my heart, causing intense pain. It was awful. They had me do all the preparations, only to hit me with this. Bitterness and heartache overwhelmed me. Helpless, I had to call a taxi and head back home. I'm Allison, 31 years old, married to Joseph, who's the same age. We got married 2 years ago, and Joseph bought us a house when I didn't want to live with his parents. It's close to their place, but I prefer it to living with them. Still, they're quite demanding, always asking me to run errands or clean up after them. It can feel like harassment sometimes. But Joseph always apologizes for their behavior. I try to endure it. His parents care a lot about what others think, so they treat me well in public. I have to be careful not to say anything negative about them. But deep down, I've always hoped to understand them better someday. But being abandoned by my husband left me reeling, and it took me a while to recover. The idea of going camping came up a week ago when we visited his parents on our day off. While cleaning the storage room, I stumbled upon a lantern. "Do you guys go camping?" I asked. "Huh? What do you mean?" My husband's parents seemed surprised. "Oh, that. We bought it just in case of a power outage. We forgot we had it." "I see. My dad loves camping, and I used to go with him a lot. So I wondered if you guys were into it too." When I mentioned my dad's enthusiasm for camping and his RV, my husband's eyes lit up. "That sounds great. I've always wanted to try it. Let's go on our first family camping trip next week for a night and 2 days. Allison, can you rent an RV? My dad loves his RV and takes good care of it, so I'm not sure if he'll lend it to us." "You'll have to convince him." When I hesitated, my husband pleaded. "It's our first time camping and we don't know what we need. It would be safer to borrow your dad's RV. Plus, I really want to make my parents happy with a fun camping adventure. Please, Allison." With him asking so earnestly, I couldn't refuse. I went straight to my dad's place and laid out the situation. To my surprise, he was all for it. "Really? That's wonderful. I thought you might hesitate, considering how meticulously you care for it. But if it's for you, Allison, I'm more than happy to lend it, and it warms my heart to see you trying to please Joseph's parents. Here, take this whole camping gear set so you can enjoy your first trip. These items are beginner-friendly, perfect for you." My dad carefully selected gear and explained everything. It meant a lot to me to see how much he cared. I felt a surge of happiness. Maybe this camping trip could help me bond with my in-laws after all. "Okay, I'll get everything ready," I promised. I booked a campground with power access and a nearby hot spring. When I shared the news with my husband and in-laws, they were thrilled. "We're so lucky to have you, Allison. I can't wait," exclaimed my husband. "I'm glad to see you're excited," his parents chimed in. On the day of the trip, I hopped into the RV with my husband, bubbling with anticipation. We hit the highway, heading for the campground. My heart raced with excitement, but as we drove, my mother-in-law began making demands again. "Joseph, I'm thirsty. Can we stop at the interchange?" "Mom, I brought drinks. You can choose one from here," my husband replied. None of them satisfied her. "As my daughter-in-law, you should know what I like," she scolded. I'm sorry," I muttered. Stepping out of the car at the interchange to buy her a Diet Pepper, as she requested, I was stunned when my husband spoke in a cold, unfamiliar tone. "Allison, you're not part of our family. Go home now." "Excuse me, what? What's gotten into you?" He seemed like a completely different person. He wasn't the Joseph I knew, the one who usually cared for me. Shocked and bewildered by his words, I watched as they laughed and the RV pulled away. abandoning me in the middle of nowhere. Was this some twisted joke? Panic rising, I made a call, only to be met with a shocking response from my mother-in-law. You really thought you could join us? How bold of you. Remember, you're not part of our family. Bye, we're going to have a great time without you. Stunned, I stood there, staring at the phone after the call abruptly ended. How could they? They had me do all the preparations only to leave me behind. What was Joseph thinking? Bitterness and sadness flooded over me, but I couldn't confront them. Instead, I called a taxi and went home. The next day, my husband and in-laws returned from their camping trip, chatting excitedly about their adventures. Not once did they apologize for leaving me behind. When I questioned them about it, their response was astonishing. I stood up for you, Allison, and they treated you so unfairly. It's ridiculous. We're not letting this go. I refuse to let them get away with it. We're going to get even. How? I've got a plan up my sleeve, and I know just the perfect spot for camping. Listen closely, my amazing dad. It's foolproof. With my father's words echoing in my mind, I returned to my in-laws' home, where my husband and his parents were still buzzing with excitement from yesterday's trip. It was the perfect opportunity to set them up. I put on a gentle smile, hiding my true feelings, and addressed them in a calm tone. I found an even more incredible spot than yesterday's. The autumn leaves are stunning right now. Why not go all out with a proper camping trip instead of staying in the RV? We could set up a tent, have a barbecue, and soak in the scenery. At night, the sky is filled with stars. Really? Where's this spot? It's a secret place I want to keep just for us. Can I come along as your wife? That sounds fantastic. It'll be a blast. Since it's a secluded area, I'll drive. I'll play my part as your wife and as my in-law's daughter-in-law. Can I join you guys? As expected, my husband and his parents were thrilled and agreed to let me join them. The following weekend, we decided to go camping again. True to form, they left all the preparation to me, and their nagging about discipline only intensified each day. I held on to my secret plan, meticulously arranging my revenge, and the day of our trip finally arrived. I borrowed an RV from my father, drove to a secluded campsite, and my husband and in-laws were thrilled. Wow, it feels like our own private getaway. They eagerly scoped out the surroundings, thrilled by the new setting. Let's take a walk and soak in the scenery, I suggested. Sounds good. Enjoy your walk. Come on, let's go. I ushered them off with a smile, then turned my attention to setting up. About 30 minutes later, my husband called in a panic. We're lost. I can't find your dad's RV. I'm heading back home with it. What? What do you mean? Don't worry. I left you with the essentials for a real camping experience. It was part of the plan my father had come up with. He thought it would be good for them to try some rugged camping, like being on a deserted island instead of a cushy campground with electricity and nearby hotels. You should set up your tent soon and gather wood for a fire. I know you don't have a lighter, so you'll have to start the fire the old-fashioned way. I left a pot so you can at least cook some rice. You left us behind. You were the ones who said I wasn't part of the family and shouldn't come camping with you. So I dropped you off at the campsite and sadly went home. Isn't that what you wanted? My husband was momentarily speechless, struck by my reasoning. Enjoy your camping trip with just your precious family, I retorted before almost ending the call. But my husband, consumed by rage, erupted into a tirade. Don't be ridiculous. Come back now, or I'll divorce you. Fine, let's get divorced. You'll regret it when you're stranded on the highway and find my father's beloved RV trashed. I've had enough of living with your disrespectful parents. And you'll be the one regretting it, you fool. I snapped back, feeling utterly repulsed by his behavior as he abruptly hung up. I was nearby, but I had no desire to go pick them up. Later, my husband called again. His tone drastically changed, his voice trembling with confusion. I can't figure out how to set up the tent. It's raining and my parents are getting mad. And it's getting cold. What do I do? Already regretting it because it's cold. That was fast. Why not search for tent setup tutorials on YouTube? Forget about the tent. My dad yanked it too hard and tore it apart. Allison, you've had your fun. Now get yourself together and come pick us up. I'm not coming. If you walk for about an hour, you'll hit a main road. If you're not camping, then come down here with your stuff. What? Just because I'm asking nicely doesn't mean you can act all high and mighty. Realizing this was my husband's true colors, my feelings for him had cooled completely. All I could do was sigh. Forget it. I'm going to ditch all this useless stuff. Just wait till we get home. That's private property. Dumping anything here is illegal, and you'll get sued for it. There's a sign clearly saying no littering. I don't care. My husband's tone was firm, showing doubt about my seriousness regarding divorce. I had to make him see reality. After the divorce, I'll be seeking compensation for the emotional distress caused by all the harassment you've put me through. What? Divorce? Is this? I'm serious. Our conversation from the time I was abandoned on the highway is recorded on my dad's RV dashcam. So you can't deny it. And I've recorded the conversations of your harassment afterward too. Let's calm down. We don't have any savings because we've been paying the mortgage. If you leave, I won't have anyone to cook and clean, which will be a problem. Think before you speak. I'm not your maid. If you refuse the divorce, I'll take it to court. It'll become a big issue, and everyone in the family will know. My husband, always mindful of others' opinions, fell silent. I could hear his parents fussing in the background, but it no longer mattered to me. After that, my husband tried to start a sentence with a "you know," but the call abruptly ended. Soon after, my in-laws began bombarding me with calls, but I ignored them all. Eventually, the calls ceased, likely because their phones ran out of battery. My father's revenge plan had worked like a charm. On my way home, I swung by to pick up the divorce papers, filled them out, and left them on the table before heading back to my childhood home, where my caring father lived. Interestingly, it took my husband and in-laws 3 hours to descend the mountain, a journey that usually only took 1. You should have used Google Maps instead of bothering me with calls. How foolish. My husband, driven by desperation to make me stay, stormed into my parents' house, his fury palpable. "Allison, come out here now. I'll show you what happens when you defy me. If you've got something to say it to my father. He's pretty steamed, so watch out." My burly and imposing father confronted my husband at the door, giving him a piece of his mind and putting him in his place. Additionally, they left their tent and camping gear in the mountains, resulting in a lawsuit for illegal dumping filed by the mountain's owner. The one who filed the lawsuit was my father, who had inherited the land from my grandfather. With numerous cases of trespassing and dumping occurring, security cameras were installed, revealing the culprits responsible for the mess. Now, we wait to see what consequences they'll face. After finalizing the divorce, I demanded and received $1 million each from my husband and in-laws for the emotional distress they caused me. Struggling to keep up with their mortgage, my husband's house was foreclosed, and he now resides with his parents in their rundown home, living a modest life as a family of 3. But, as they say, there's no point crying over spilled milk. I returned to my former job before marriage, regaining the lifestyle that suits me. Next month, I'm planning a camping trip with my parents, and I'm certain it'll be an enjoyable experience.
Look, I'm Jess. I crunch numbers for a living, and I guess I'm doing all right for myself. I've got this kid, Alex, a real bright spark, keeps asking questions about everything under the sun. Then there's my other half, Mike. He runs the show at some warehouse, not the career of his dreams, but it pays some of the bills. And it's just enough for Mike. He's not the type to chase more. Our life's what you'd call run-of-the-mill. We wake up, go about our jobs, come back, and do the family thing. Not exciting, but steady. Problem is, the steady's turned shaky lately. Mike, he's been rolling in late from work, looks like he's been through the ringer every time. Bags under his eyes, shirt wrinkled, and his mood stinks. Tried to get him to chat about it, crack that shell of his. But that man's locked up tighter than a bank vault. "Mike, what's eating you?" I asked him just last night. "You're acting all sorts of strange these hours." He just glared at me, all red-eyed and frazzled. "It's nothing, Jess. Work's a pain in the neck, that's all. Just lay off, okay?" I know when to back off, but it's like a splinter in my mind, you know? He used to be straight with me, and now it's like I'm talking to a brick wall. "You're not touching your dinner, Mike. What's up?" I tried to nudge him at supper. "Nothing fancy, just some meat and potatoes." But he barely poked at it. I said, "Drop it, Jess. I ain't in the mood to chat about my day." He snapped back, pushing the plate away, and that end of discussion looked plastered on his face. Alex piped up from across the table, fork halfway to his mouth. "Dad, you gonna come to my game this weekend? You said you'd try." Mike just ruffled Alex's hair, his attempt at a smile more like a wince. "We'll see, champ. Your old man's got a lot on his plate right now." I watched them, father and son, an unsaid worry passing between them. That's my world right there, feeling like it might come apart at the seams. There's this static in the air every time Mike walks in late, a mix of sweat and something sour I can't place. He whispers about work stress, but there's a tug in my gut telling me it's more than that, a lot more. Mike's become like those puzzle pieces you find behind the couch, doesn't fit anywhere, doesn't make sense. And the more I push, the more he clams up. What gives? So there you have it. No sugarcoating, no dressing it up. Just our plain Jane life hitting a bit of a rough patch. I've got a kid to raise and bills to pay, and now a husband who's acting like he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. Only thing is, he won't let me carry a piece of that burden. I'm out here trying to figure it out without letting on to Alex that there's trouble brewing. Gone. Just like that, Mike's car was history. Came home on foot, a look on his face I had trouble reading. "Jess," he said, his voice jittery, "the car's gone. Stolen." "So, call the cops, Mike. My brother can sniff this out." "Easy," I said. But he was shaking his head before I even finished the sentence. "No way, I've got it covered," he insisted, but he wouldn't look me in the eyes when he said it. The whole thing smelled fishy. He'd never had good luck with cars, but stolen? That was a new one. "Got it covered how? You got a private detective in your pocket or something?" I teased, trying to lighten the mood, but Mike wasn't having any of it. "Just back off, Jess. I said I'll handle it." His words came out harsh, and he walked off to the shower, leaving me standing there with a kitchen full of whys and what-ifs. His dad's car became his new wheels. You should have seen it, a battered thing that coughed more than it roared. "Borrowing it for a while," he said, each word heavy like stones. We sat down at the kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg, and I watched Alex, who looked more and more like his father every day, swinging his feet as he ate his cereal. He was itching to ask about the car, you could tell, but one look from me kept it shut tight in his mouth. Over the rattle of the morning news and Alex's spoon clinking, I decided to push one more time. "We should report it, Mike. Insurance will eat us alive if we don't," I said, real casual. Mike slammed his mug on the table, coffee splashing out. "Jess, for the last time, drop it. It's not your problem." Alex's feet stopped swinging, and that's when you know it's real bad, when a kid goes quiet all sudden like. The rest of the day was just nuts and bolts. Mike left in his dad's clunker, and I dropped Alex off at school, my head a mess with thoughts screaming in all directions. By the time I clocked into work, I had settled on one thing: I was going to find out what was going on, with or without Mike. Lunch break, my phone buzzed, it was my brother. "Jess, you okay? Heard about Mike's car. Need me to take a look?" he offered, always the protector, even though we're adults now. I wanted to say yes, tell him everything, but I hesitated. What if Mike was in deeper than just a stolen car? "I'll let you know," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, like it was nothing, just a car gone AWOL, not my world tipping sideways. By the time I got home, the place was silent, no sign of Mike or his troubles. Only Alex at the table, scribbling away at his homework, the TV murmuring in the background. So, here we go again, another chapter in the life of Jess. A missing car, a husband with secrets, and a boatload of unanswered questions. Tomorrow's another day, but one thing's for sure, I can't just sit on my hands. I'm finding out what's going on, one way or another. Mike's not the only one good at keeping things tight under wraps. Ever seen someone there, but not there? That's Mike. Misses dinner, doesn't kiss Alex goodnight, turns invisible come bedtime. Acts like he's on another planet. The weekend rolled around, Alex ready for those bike rides they used to nail every Saturday morning. He's there, helmet on, excitement buzzing off him like bees on a hive. And nothing, Mike's locked away in the bedroom acting like he's turned to smoke. Mike, come on. The kid's waiting. You promised. I yelled through the door, my hand gripping the knob so tight my knuckles got white. I'm not up for it, Jess. Just take him, will you? His voice a muffled surrender from behind the wood. Alex's face fell a mile. I shrugged, combed his hair back with my fingers. Let's go, champ, just you and me this time. We hit the pavement, me pedaling behind him, watching those little legs pump like pistons. He's getting good, too good. Should have been his dad watching. After, over cold sandwiches, I lay it out for his folks. The stolen car, the late nights, the silence heavy as lead. They're good folks, made me feel like family since day one. They listened, hands clasped, a wrinkle of worry etched between shared glances. Jess, kids his age, his mom started, always the forgiving type. They get like this. You ride it out. Midlife thing or not, he's riding out alone. I shot back, not buying any of this phase talk. He's ditching his son, for God's sake. His dad chimed in, cutting the air with that old sense of authority he can't shake off. Give the man space, Jess. We didn't raise him to bail on family. Space? Feels like he's halfway to the moon right now. I fired off, done with sugarcoating bitter pills. They didn't have the answers, none of us did. So, I sat there, the kitchen clock ticking away your standard awkward silence. They love him, but they're clutching at straws, just like me. Back home, I find Mike on the couch blanketed in shadows, the room dark except for the flicker of some late-night show. Alex is long asleep, dreams and all. We need to talk, Mike. Now, I said, my voice steady as a drumbeat, every word a decision. He peels himself off the couch, tired or defeated, it's hard to tell. What is it, Jess? Mike huffs, like it's an effort just to stand. I'm not blind, something's gnawing at you. It's eating us up, all of us. My words clipped out like bullets. Mike's eyes finally lift to meet mine, some spark in their fighting through the fog. Jess, it's a mess you don't need to be in. Oh, I'm in it, Mike. You made sure of that when you started sleepwalking through your life. I'd had it, my patience frayed to strands. He leans on the wall. For a sec, it looked like he'd slide to the floor. I can't, not yet. That voice, a whisper of its regular self. Okay, Mike, let's see how long you can keep up this act. I'm clawing for answers, and if Mike won't hand them over, I'll turn over every rock, every dark corner, until everything that's hidden starts spilling out into the light. For Alex, I'll do it. For us, I'll go the distance. The stillness of the night was shattered by the shrill ring of the phone. It was the sound that heralds news, seldom good. Mike's hand shot out to snatch it up, and the blood drained from his face as he listened to the voice on the other end. There were a few hushed, frantic words, and then silence. Heart problems, he said, voice shaking, looking at me with eyes full of terror. Dad's been taken to the hospital. Before I could even process the information, Mike was already dressed and darting for the door, his father's old car keys in hand. Wait! I'll come with you. I cried out, but he was gone. The door slammed behind him, and the sound echoed through the empty house like a grim reminder that I was now alone with my thoughts and the daunting tick-tock of the wall clock. Hours passed, each minute stretching longer than the last, anxiety my only companion. Doubt began to gnaw at me as I watched the moon trace its path across the sky. Against all instincts that screamed at me to stay put, I picked up the phone and dialed my mother-in-law. Is everything okay with Dad? I breathed into the phone when she picked up. There was a pause, a flicker of confusion in her voice. What are you talking about, dear? He's right here, watching the late show with me. The room spun. Mike, he told me there were heart problems, that Dad was taken to the hospital. Oh, honey, she said, her voice laced with worry and something else, something akin to disbelief. There's no hospital. There's no heart issues. Mike never said a word to us about going anywhere tonight. Bile rose in my throat. The betrayal stung like a slap in the face. My husband, the man who was supposed to be my partner in all things life threw at us, had lied straight to my face. Mike left in a panic. Said it was urgent, I managed to say, my own voice sounding distant and foreign. If he's not with you, then where? We'll figure this out. She cut in, her tone attempting reassurance that couldn't reach me. You just stay there with Alex. We'll sort it all out. After I hung up, the silence of the house screamed louder than the ring of the phone ever did. The trust we had, the foundation we built our family on, felt like it had crumbled in an instant. Where was he, and why lie? The questions blazed in my mind, turning over and over without answers. The phone felt heavy in my hand as Ron's voice finally pierced through the static uncertainty. Jess? What's this late call about? Taking a breath to steady myself, I dove in. Ron, Mike mentioned something about you, about a hospital. Is everything all right? Silence enveloped the line for a brief moment before Ron replied. Hospital? No, nothing like that. I'm fine, Jess. Why would Mike say that? A knot tightened in my gut, and I knew something wasn't right. He said you had heart trouble. He took your car. I'm worried, Ron. All right, I can track where my car's gone off to, he offered after a pause. Give me a moment. We hung up, and the ensuing wait filled the room like a thick fog. Alex's sleepy voice broke the silence with a question. Is Grandpa okay? I smiled reassuringly. We'll know soon. True to his word, half an hour later, Ron's voice relayed through the phone. The car's at the city hospital. A silent alarm went off in my head. Thanks, Ron. We're going to check on this, I said, the last words shadowed by a chilling premonition. Grabbing our coats, I quickly dressed Alex. We shared no words on the matter, the gravity of our mission spoke loud enough. Together, we left the warmth of our home for the cool ambiguity of the night. The city's roads lay mostly empty as we made our way to the hospital, the silence in the car a stark contrast to the clamor of thoughts ricocheting in my mind. When we arrived in the parking lot, I found Ron's car abandoned under the eerie glow of streetlights. Do we go inside, Mommy? Alex inquired, his innocence a striking contrast to the complexity of our situation. I took a deep breath, weighing the options. My instinct urged me to surge forward, to confront the mystery head-on, but caution whispered its words of prudence. The pieces didn't add up, and whatever awaited inside might be something I needed to face without Alex by my side. We'll approach this together, but carefully, Alex. We'll go in, but we have to be prepared for whatever we might find. He nodded, his small hand finding mine, a gesture of silent solidarity. I took Alex by the hand, making sure he stayed close. Remember, stay with me no matter what, I said to him as we walked towards the hospital entrance. The automatic doors slid open with a whoosh, and the sterile smell of the place hit my nose. You could never forget that hospital smell. We navigated through the corridors, my eyes scanning, looking for Mike. And then I saw him, just outside one of the rooms. He wasn't alone. I saw the woman first. Her arms cradling a newborn, looking tired and familiar. Mike looked like he had seen a ghost, his face drained of color the moment our eyes met. What the hell, Mike? I said, louder than I meant to. The woman stepped back, looking between us, holding the baby closer to her chest. Who's she? She asked, her voice blunt. Mike's eyes were glued to my face, his mouth opening and closing with no sound. Jess, this is not what it looks like, he finally stammered out. Really? 'Cause it looks pretty bad from where I'm standing, I shot back. The woman piped up again. He sold his car. For us. To pay the bills here. Mike tried to interrupt, but I put my hand up. I'm not talking to you right now. Turning to the woman, I asked, how long has this been going on? A while, she said flatly, bouncing the baby slightly. And the kid, I couldn't even finish the sentence. Yeah, he's Mike's, she confirmed, looking me right in the eye. I felt like I got punched in the gut. My head was spinning, and I could barely register Alex's hand squeezing mine. Mommy, is the baby sick? Alex's small voice brought me back to reality. No, honey, the baby's fine, I said automatically, still trying to wrap my head around the mess. Mike finally found his voice. Jess, please, let's talk about this. Talk? I almost laughed, but it came out like a bark. You got a whole secret life here, and you want to talk? You should have talked before it got to this. Mike looked down, and I could see he was shaken, but right now I didn't care. Jess, I can explain. Save it, Mike. We're done here, I said, cutting him off. I grabbed Alex's hand and turned to leave. Mike reached out, trying to stop me, but I snapped at him. Don't you touch me. Walking away, I could still hear him calling after me, but his words were just noise. Alex looked up at me with questions in his eyes, but I wasn't ready to answer them yet. We got to the car, and I strapped Alex into his seat, taking a moment to breathe. I could feel tears pricking my eyes, but I held them back. As we drove away from the hospital, away from the unwelcome surprise, I didn't know what was going to happen. But right then, I knew I had to be strong, for Alex. We barely got home when I saw Ron and Linda's car screech into the driveway. They came out fast, walking towards me like they meant business. Linda had that look, the one that meant trouble, big trouble. Jess, what's going on? Ron was the first to speak. His eyes were darting around, looking for Mike. It's done, Ron. We're done. I'm filing for divorce. The fairy tale's over, I said, not mincing my words. Linda stepped forward. What the hell did that boy do now? The anger in her voice hit the air like a slap. I barely had time to tell them everything. Mike's car pulled in, right on cue. He got out, slow, like he was walking to his own funeral. What the hell, Mike? Ron was on him like a hawk. You've got that girl, with a baby. A baby, Mike. Mike's head hung low, his voice was barely a whisper. Dad, I'm sorry. I messed up. Messed up? You call this a mess up? Linda was almost screeching now. The woman from the hospital stepped out of Mike's car, baby in her arms, and everything just stopped for a second. The look on Ron and Linda's faces, it was like they saw a ghost. Who's she? Linda's voice was ice cold now. Mike looked like he was fighting back tears. She's someone I'd been seeing. Seeing? While you have a family? Ron's voice boomed. Linda chimed in, and you got her pregnant while you're married to our daughter-in-law? And we find out at a hospital? The woman stood there, silent, holding the baby closer when Linda's eyes shot daggers at her. This ain't sliding by, Mike. No way in hell, I snapped. Mike turned to me, desperation in his voice. Jess, please. Save it, I cut him off. Linda stepped forward. You're going to support this child. You're not walking away from this. But believe me, you're gonna pay for breaking our daughter-in-law's heart. Ron nodded, and we'll be right there with her, every step of the way. Mike just stood there, defeat written all over him. I'll do whatever it takes. You bet you will, Ron said, his anger settling into a grim resolve. I looked at all of them, my soon-to-be ex-husband, his mistress, his parents. My lawyer. Tomorrow. I want this settled. Fast. Ron and Linda gave me a nod. We've got your back, Linda said, and the look in her eye told me she meant every word. I turned on my heel, Alex's hand in mine, and walked back into our now broken home. Mike's voice followed me, saying sorry over and over, but it was too late for sorry. Life had sure done a number on us. But there I sat, on the porch swing, Alex curled up next to me, a math book opened on his lap. The sun was setting, the sky a mix of pink and gold, like a watercolor gone wild. How's homework going, kiddo? I asked, not ready to dive back into the adult world just yet. Alex shrugged. Okay, I guess. The numbers keep doing a dance though. Yeah, they do that sometimes. I chuckled, ruffling his hair. They'll settle down if you stare at them long enough. We laughed, the easy sound of it taking the edge off the day. Then the phone buzzed. I pulled it out of my pocket, a text from Linda. How are you holding up? It read. I smiled. Linda always had timing like a clockwork. Getting by. One piece at a time, I texted back. I looked out at the yard, thinking about how different life was now. Mike had taken a serious tumble from the life we once shared. His new place, a cramped apartment above a noisy bar, was a far cry from the house he'd left behind. He was pulling double shifts, trying to make ends meet, pay the alimony and whatever he owed to her. Mom, when's Dad coming around? Alex's voice pulled me from my thoughts. Haven't heard, buddy. But you know, we're doing pretty good, you and I answered. Yeah, just us. He smiled, and there was something in that smile that told me the kid was going to be all right. Then the other phone rang, the landline. Old school. It jarred the quiet of the evening. Alex jumped up to grab it. I got it, Mom. Careful there, Speedy. I called after him. I heard his little feet pound the hallway. The sound of his laughter as he chatted with whoever was on the other end warmed the space. He was a resilient little man. I took a deep breath. Mom, it's for you, he called out, his voice echoing. I picked up where he left off. Hello? Jess, it's me. Mike's voice was low, almost guilty. What can I do for you, Mike? My voice was colder than I intended. Just, are you both okay? His voice sounded like it carried the weight of the world. We're managing, Mike. Alex is doing great. There was silence, a long one, then a defeated sigh. That's good. That's good to hear. Mike, look, we're picking up the pieces here. You should be doing the same, I said, more firmly this time. I am, Jess. Or at least, I'm trying. Another pause. He was always heavy with the pauses. Goodbye, Mike. The click of the phone felt like the end of an era. It kinda was. I walked back onto the porch, the creak of the swing welcoming me back. Alex looked up, his eyes were curious. Life was indeed very different now. Just Alex and me, with Grandma and Grandpa popping in enough to keep us smothered in love and bad jokes. The house was quieter, but it was still full of us, our life, our laughter, our love. The days ahead would still have their challenges. Divorce papers don't wipe away the messiness of life, and co-parenting was a road we were still figuring out how to navigate. But that evening, as the sky turned from pink to a deep blue, a sense of peace settled over the house. Hi, I'm Marie. Mom and wife full-time, that's me. Paul, that's my husband, works the trading gig, and let's just say he's married to his job just as much as he is to me. Used to scribble down thoughts on books, reading between and beyond the lines, but these days I'm more about reading bedtime stories to our boy, Jack. Life threw some curveballs early on, lost my parents when I still needed them. That was rough. Then along came Paul, with a family in tow. His folks were the real deal, good people, you know. Took me in, no questions. Made me feel like I finally belonged somewhere again. Been with Paul for years now, since those college days when love seemed to be enough to fill any void. We settled into a rhythm, he at work and me taking care of everything else. But man, did that rhythm skip and stumble when Jack came into the picture. Paul changed, or maybe this was always him, just waiting for a reason to surface. He'd come home on a Friday night with a few too many drinks in him, loose-lipped and surly. You gotta start shedding that weight, Marie, he'd snipe after slipping off his tie. You barely fit in those jeans anymore. I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt, but I told myself to brush it off, toughen up, maybe he'd cool down by morning. But mornings just brought hangovers and silence until the next round. The house became this place where I tiptoed, trying not to set Paul off. Jack, little trooper, he could feel it too, sticking close, watching his old man with wide, careful eyes. One particularly rough Friday, Paul came home and made a beeline for the fridge, crack open a cold one. I was on the floor with Jack, blocks scattered around. "Another day in paradise, huh?" Paul sneered, leaning against the counter. I forced a smile. Just the usual, you know, chasing after this little tornado. I ruffled Jack's hair, but my heart wasn't in it. Paul tossed his head back, downing half the bottle. "Maybe put some of that energy into a workout routine, eh?" I bit my tongue, counting to 10 in my head. "I'll look into it," was all I managed, shuffling Jack into his pile of toys, anything to escape the cutting edge in Paul's tone. But the weight wasn't just on my hips, it was on my chest, heavy, making it hard to breathe. I didn't know who I was in Paul's eyes anymore. I had finally shaken off those last stubborn pounds. It felt good, kind of. But Paul, well, he had a talent for finding flaws. My sweats and baggy tees were the new target. "Jesus, Marie, you dress like you're living at the gym. When was the last time you dressed up? Remember how you used to look?" There he was, leaning on the doorframe with that look that said everything his words didn't. I glanced down at my stretched-out mom life tee and yoga pants. "This is just practical, Paul. You want me all dolled up to do laundry and wrangle our son?" One corner of his mouth curled up like he had just made a successful trade. "I dunno, how about looking good for your husband? That used to matter." I sighed, rolling my eyes. "Well, unless my husband starts taking meetings at the playground or the grocery store, I think I'll stick with practical." He shook his head, chuckling without humor. "You used to care, Marie." His voice trailed off as he wandered back toward the living room, his disapproval hanging in the air like a bad smell. Then there was Jack, our boy, trying to navigate the shaky terrain between us. I was teaching him please and thank you, thinking manners mattered. Paul caught a bit of our lesson one afternoon and scoffed. "Look at you, teaching him to be Mr. Manners. You want him to get trampled on?" "Manners are important, Paul. It's about respect," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Respect is earned, not politeness the least," he shot back. "He needs to toughen up, not be some yes, please pushover." Then the whole freeloader thing started. One night, Paul came home, askew, looking like he had won and lost the same fight. "Nice day?" he asked, sarcasm heavy as he glanced around what I'd come to see as our minefield of a home. I put down Jack's toy and braced for what was coming. "Just the same, dealing with tantrums and spills. How was work?" Paul's laugh was short and sharp. "Work? Oh, it was just dandy, supporting a parasite." My cheeks burned. "Excuse me?" My voice was a little too loud. Jack's eyes flitted from me to Paul, sensing the shift. "A parasite, Marie." "I work, you play house," he said, each word pointed and heavy. "That's the thanks I get? I am raising our child, Paul." "Your child. That's work. That's vital," I said, my voice rising now, too. Jack started fussing then, picking up on the tension. I swept him up into my arms, trying to shield him from the fallout. Paul had a knack for knowing when he'd pushed too far, and his next words were more measured. "Marie, I go out there and deal with sharks all day. Come home, and what? I don't know, something different. I can't be your one-man show, Paul," I said softly, trying to defuse the bomb that our marriage had become. "I'm here, juggling a million things for us, for Jack." We looked at each other then, really looked, and I wondered if he saw the plea in my eyes. The help me, back me up, be with me that I felt screaming inside. But he turned away, the finality of his silence telling me that no, he didn't see. He didn't want to. One day, the disrespect boiled over. Jack scrunched up his little face and called me a name, a real zinger. He got it from Paul. "You're just a lazy bum," he had hurled at me, his tiny voice bitter and angry. I felt like I'd been slapped. What? Jack, no, you can't say that. I stumbled, shocked. He folded his arms, stubborn as his dad. Dad says it, so can I. That was the last straw. When Paul got home, I was waiting, steaming like a forgotten kettle. You know what your son called me today? I laid into him without waiting for an answer. Paul dropped his keys on the counter and chuckled, clearly not seeing the line had been crossed. What did he say? The truth? He tossed his words over his shoulder as he walked to the fridge, his casualness like acid on my skin. Is that funny to you? I was shouting now, my usual restraint snapped tight as a dry twig. Your son is calling me names. Paul leaned against the kitchen counter, beer in hand, a smirk blooming on his face. Oh, come on, Marie. Kid's gotta learn to stand his ground. I was staring at him, hands balled into fists. By disrespecting his mother? He shrugged, a lazy lift of his shoulders that sent me teetering on the edge. You're too soft on him. Look, he's getting some spine. Spine? My voice shot up another octave. He's learning to be just like you. Paul grinned and ruffled Jack's hair. Ain't that right, champ? I turned to Jack, who was looking at us with eyes that were too old for his face. Jack, listen to me. What you said to me this morning was wrong. You can't talk to people like that. Jack's chin jutted out, defiant and stubborn. But Dad. I don't care what Dad says, you listen to your mom. I cut him off, my heart thudding like a drum. I was desperate for him not to follow in Paul's footsteps. But Paul wasn't letting it go. The boy's gotta learn to speak up. World's not gonna hand him anything. You keep coddling him, he'll end up. I get it, all right? I get it. I cut him off, feeling the weight of his words like a physical thing on my chest. But there's a line. You don't get it, do you? Paul threw up his hands, that ugly smirk still there. Whatever, Marie. You make mountains out of molehills. I turned from him, that burning in my chest now a churning mess. This is not how I want our son to grow up. This disrespect ends now, it ends here. Paul just took a swig of his beer, and I knew, right then, my words were just bouncing off him. I looked at Jack, really looked at him. You apologize to me, now, I said, the power in my voice surprising even me. Jack's eyes darted between me and Paul, but he knew that tone. Sorry, Mom. The word was small, almost lost in the kitchen, but it was there and it was a start. I moved closer to Jack, knelt down so I was eye level with him. Thank you. We treat each other with respect in this house, you got it? Paul snorted behind me, but I ignored him. Jack nodded, a hint of my boy peeking through that new sullen shadow he wore. It was a crack in the wall Paul was building around him, a crack, but also a starting point. I stood up, squared my shoulders. We're going to fix this, Jack. No more name-calling, no more disrespect. We're better than that. I took Jack's hand, and we left the room, leaving Paul and his smugness behind us. I stood there on the sidewalk, my phone shaking in my hand. It was one of those moments where your gut ties up in knots. There, across the street, Paul was laughing it up with some woman. Blonde, curvy, and looking at my husband like he was the last piece of chocolate in the box. My thumb pressed record before I even decided to. The walk home felt a million miles long. A part of me hoped it was a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew. Back in our kitchen, I threw my keys on the counter. Paul was sitting there with a beer, like he always did, but today the sight of him made me sick. Without a word, I tossed my phone on the table in front of him, the video playing. Care to explain? Paul looked at the screen, his eyes going hard when he saw what was on it. He muted it, placed it calmly on the counter, and then looked straight at me. Yeah, she's beautiful, he said, his voice dripping venom. You used to be like that. I felt the slap of his words, my cheeks flaming with anger, my body tense. So, that's it, huh? You parade around town with some woman while I'm at home? Paul stood up, his chair scraping back against the tile. He was too close now, his voice low and mean. "What, you stalking me now, Marie? Can't handle the fact that maybe there's more out there than what's inside these walls?" I was reeling, feeling the pieces click together. "Cut the crap, Paul. You're cheating." He didn't even flinch. "You wanna know why?" he said, his chest puffing up. "Because around her, I'm somebody. Not just the guy who pays the bills or the bad guy 'cause he ain't Mr. Rogers." "So that's it?" I edged back, feeling the counter dig into my hips. "Your family's not enough for you?" Paul snorted and grabbed his beer again. "It stopped being enough a long time ago. Maybe if you'd have kept up with yourself, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere." The bile rattled in my throat. "I'm not the one who promised till death do us part." His laugh was short and punched the air. "Those are just words, Marie. They stopped meaning anything to you a long time ago." I should have been crying, but the tears wouldn't come. I was just empty and angry. "I gave you everything, Paul. I gave you a son, I made a home for us. And this is how you repay me?" He took a long drink, then leaned back against the counter. "You gave me a home? Looks like a prison to me. Same old, every damn day. You think that's a life?" "We made vows, Paul," I shouted, my voice cracking. "Yeah, and you broke them every day with your sweatpants and constant nagging." His face twisted into something ugly, something monstrous. That was the last thing he said before I walked out, my heart numb, anger seeping into every corner of my being. I was on edge the whole ride over to Paul's folks' place. It was gonna be nasty, but I had to lay it out for them. They needed to know who their son really was. His mom answered the door, with a happy smile. "Marie, what brings you here at this hour?" I just barreled past her. "I gotta show you both something." Once his dad came in, I played them the video straight up. His mom gasped, her hand flying to cover her mouth. His dad, red-faced and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, he barked at me, "Paul's gotta stop this nonsense now." And like that, all hell broke loose. That night back at our place, Paul kicked off as soon as I walked in. "You had to drag my parents into this, didn't ya?" His voice was loaded, ready to fire. "Yeah, well someone's got to," I shot back, my nerves steel. He was a storm brewing. With a step towards me, his hand raised, but he didn't get far. "You're bad." Jack's voice cut through, strong and braver than any of us. Paul stopped stone cold. Paul's hand dropped, and his mask slipped a second, shock in his eyes. But then he hardened up again, cold as steel. "I want you out," he said, spitting the words like they were sour. "Take the kid and go." So we went. With Jack's hand in mine, I didn't look back. Bags thrown in the back of the car, we headed for the city, miles of road unwinding like my thoughts. The luxury house was something else, my unexpected inheritance. 2 stories, white columns, and a porch you could throw a party on, all waiting in another city, away from everything that had gone wrong. None of my folks, not even a whisker of Paul or his clan, had ever set eyes on it. When we pulled up to this grand house, Jack's face pressed to the window, eyes as wide as the moon. "Is this a castle?" His voice was a whisper, almost lost in the vastness of it all. "Something like that," I said, a laugh escaping me for the first time in. I couldn't even remember. We stepped into that house, our new beginning. It was silent, save for the echo of our footsteps on the marble floors, bouncing off the high ceilings crowned with crystal chandeliers. The furniture was swanky, left behind by folks I wish had lasted a lifetime longer. I plopped down on a couch soft as clouds, and finally, Jack's laughter filled the rooms. The sound of it was more luxurious than anything else in this place. We explored room after room, Jack running ahead like he was leading a parade. Each new door opened to a room grander than the last. "I call the biggest one," he declared, claiming a bedroom that overlooked a garden already blooming with the promise of spring. Laying him down to bed that night, the day finally caught up with me. My eyes burned with the tiredness of it all, but looking around at the high ceilings, the gold trimming catching moonlight, I knew we were worlds away from where we started. Sitting there, in the quiet of a room too nice for today's shadows, I whispered into the darkness, "We made it, kiddo." Life in the big house slowly shed the shadows of the past. Jack's giggles filled the halls more than the echoes of old fears. Most days, it felt like we had always been there, just the two of us, in our new safe haven. The house, with its silent strength, was keeping the world at bay until the day Paul showed up, uninvited and unwelcome. He was at the door in a storm of anger. I opened it and there he was, looking like trouble had followed him around. "You can't just disappear with my son, Marie." I leaned against the door frame, unfazed. "He's my son too. And I didn't disappear. I moved on." Paul's scowl deepened. He glanced around, taking in the opulence of the place with wide, disbelieving eyes. "How can you afford this? I know you don't make this kind of dough." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. "Well, turns out I had a little left over each month. Who knew?" He raised an eyebrow, a sly accusation in his gaze. "And I'm struggling to cover rent for that old place by myself. It's damn near impossible now that they jacked up the price." I shook my head. He always was good at playing the martyr. "That's not my problem anymore, Paul. I've been using my own savings to cover the gap in the rent for years. Savings that, thank God, I don't need to bleed dry for that house anymore." The greed in his eyes flared up like wildfire. "What, and you're living here in luxury while I—" "Stop right there," I cut in. "This isn't your concern. This," I motioned to the grand house behind me, "is mine. Mine and Jack's." Paul took a step forward, but I didn't back down. "Look, I came here to fix things. I'm saying I forgive you for all this, sneaking around." His audacity almost knocked the wind out of me, but I had a little surprise that would put the brakes on his charade. From behind the door, I pulled out the divorce papers and slapped them into his chest. "And here's what I'm saying. We're done." He looked as if I'd slapped him with a physical hand, his face twisting through confusion, rage, and then settling on calculating desperation. "You can't do this. What about Jack?" I stood taller, my resolve like iron. "I'm doing it for Jack. He doesn't need this chaos you bring. Sign the papers, Paul. It's over." He glanced from the papers to me, then back again, his posture deflating slightly. "You'll regret this. You can't make it alone." "That's where you're wrong." I smiled, not from humor but from a deep-seated confidence. "I'm already making it. And without you, we're doing more than just fine. We're thriving." With a shake of his head, Paul looked like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. Instead, he turned on his heel and strode away, clutching the papers like they were a snake that could bite. Once he was gone, the house seemed to exhale with me. I closed the door gently, turning back to the life I had fought so hard for. Life had a way of tossing stuff at you, hard and fast. It was Thursday, the kind of day that should have been easy, but it wasn't. We shirked dinner for a bit, setting up ramps out of old books and watching the Lego car stupidly do flips and land upside down. Jack's laugh was infectious, the sort that wiped clean the worry lines off my face. His enthusiasm was a reminder that amid all the crap, there was still good, simple, unadulterated good. Then it came, a banging on the door that made my stomach drop and my face lose all its motherly warmth. Paul had a knack for bad timing and worse entrances. I pulled the door open and there he was, looking like he'd just come from a bar fight or lost a bet. "Paul, what's up?" He scowled, that usual look he gets when he thinks the world owes him. "So, this the high life? You playing house with my Jack while I'm scraping pennies just to get by?" Jack peeked from behind me, a knight in Lego armor. "Hey, screw off, Paul. Don't talk to my mom like that." Paul's face turned a nice shade of tomato. "The hell? You let him talk like that?" I stood there, hands on hips. "He's expressing himself. Something I should have done with you a long time ago. Jack came out from behind me, all fierce. Yeah, get lost. My mom, my rules. Paul's anger was something else, a storm that had nowhere to go. You think you're smart, huh? Talking to your old man like that. Jack squared his shoulders, a small David to Paul's Goliath. Don't gotta think. I know it. Mom knows it. Paul opened his mouth, but nothing came out. There was Jack, staring him down, waiting. This was no place for Paul anymore, no place for his bluster and noise. After a tense moment, Paul shook his head, muttered something under his breath and stormed off the porch. Jack turned to me with this look, the kind of look that said, "We got this." I nodded, all the agreement he needed. We went back to boiling pasta and racing Lego cars. That's how we do it, simple, nothing fancy. We just keep on. I was gabbing on the phone with Miss Dottie, Paul's mom, who was more my family than is now. Honey, you just holler if there's anything you need, 'kay? Her voice was always a warm blanket over the line. We're all good, Miss Dottie. Really, couldn't be better, I assured her, twisting the cord around my finger. She hummed a pleased note. Just makes my heart full to hear that. Keep on keeping on, you hear? Frank, her husband, yelled from somewhere behind her. Tell her that any time she wants to send over some of that lemon meringue, we won't complain. A genuine laugh burst out of me. Expect a pie on your doorstep soon, Frank. Exchanging a few more pleasantries, we hung up. I shook my head. If someone had told me last year I'd be mining gold from the wreckage of my married life, I would have laughed in their face. Jack pulled on my sleeve, waving his drawing like a five-star general. Look, Mom. This is our house. I looked down. His scribbles had heart. A big square house and two stick figures, a little one and a tall one, with sloppy grins and a lopsided sun shining down. The swing I'd put up for him stood out in green and brown strokes. That's us, right? A dumb question, really, but it made him nod with pride. And I'm gonna sell my art, make us rich. There was serious conviction behind his toothy smile. If you do, you're buying me that fancy coffee I've been eyeing? I nudged him with a wink. He nodded, his expression all business. Only the best for my mom. And just like that, the knot in my chest loosened a bit more. Sundays were like that, full of little miracles. The thing was, life had done a real number on us, but it was looking up. Paul got slammed by the door he let hit him on his way out. The fancy house he rented to impress his mistress? Turned out to be a couple of sizes too big for his wallet. Now he was cooped up in a tiny apartment, the kind of place his pride wouldn't have let him consider a year ago. And the mistress? She hightailed it the minute his pockets turned up empty and his promises hollow. But that was a tale for some other time. Right now was about Jack and me, and the park we were marching to, hand in hand. We stepped out, and the door clicked shut, a soft full stop to one chapter before immediately kicking off the next. Jack tugged me towards the park, his excitement bubbling over. I didn't glance back at our home, no need. Ahead was everything that mattered, me and my boy, parts of a world that kept on spinning, even when you felt like you'd fallen off. My name is Alice. I'm currently parked on this faded sofa, trying to stitch together the mess that my so-called family life turned into. You know, before all this, I was living the typical 9-to-5 grind. I mean, marketing isn't exactly a thrill ride, but it was my thrill ride. Enter Jack. Dear old Jack. We were college sweethearts. That's what they call it, right? We did the whole dance, meeting at some random party, him spilling his drink and charming me with his red-faced apologies. Fast forward, love blooms, and marriage seemed like the right next step. He was some hotshot coding genius, had a nice gig as a software engineer. And things were sweet, smooth even. Then Charlie happened. Our little bundle of sleepless nights and toothless grins. So, I hung up my marketing hat and decided to go all in on this housewife gig. That meant I had more time to start picking up on the nuances of Jack's moods, especially when Linda, the Lord Almighty mother-in-law, rained down her opinions via Skype. Never met her in person, but damn, she sure did like to make her presence felt from a few hundred miles away. "You need to put your foot down, Jack." Linda's voice would slice through the speakers. "A man's home is his castle, and don't you forget it." I'd see how Jack's eyes shifted, shoulders squared like he was gearing up for war. After the call, he became a different guy. If I left a mug on the counter or dared to sit down before the clock hit acceptable by his newly acquired standards, boy, would I get it. "It's not a hotel, Alice. You see that? That's a dish out of place." His words felt like cold steel, not the Jack I knew. Jack would flip from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde and back before you could say schizophrenia. But it wouldn't stick. Once Linda's echo faded, I'd get my Jack back. On this particular Tuesday, Jack had that look in his eyes, that unnerving glint that always showed up post-Linda. He ambled into the kitchen, my domain, and leaned against the fridge with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. "Hey, babe, you need to pick up the pace around here," Mom said. I cut him off, hands deep in dough. "If Linda says jump, we asking how high now? Not funny. She's right. We won't raise Charlie in a mess. I mean, look at this place." I followed his pointing finger around our perfectly tidy kitchen. The nerve of him. I thought about giving Jack a piece of my mind, but my mother always said to pick my battles, and with Jack on a Linda-fueled bender, it didn't feel like a winnable war. Suddenly, the sound of Linda's screechy tone popped from the living room. Another Skype alert. My stomach dropped. "Come on, Alice. It's Mom. Watch the attitude." My eyes nearly rolled out of my skull. I wiped my hands and prepared to face the screen, our digital overlord. And there she was, in all her pixelated glory. "Alice, dear, I see you're busy, but remember, Jack works hard. Keep that home nice for him, won't you?" I gritted my teeth. "Of course, Linda. Nothing but the best for your boy." Jack flashed me a warning look, like be nice or else. But as Linda carried on about her expectations, I swear I felt something in me start to crack. Would this ever end? Or was I destined to live under the thumb of a woman who wasn't even in the room? On a Thursday that felt like any other, with Charlie fussing in my arms and the smell of yesterday's dinner still haunting the living room, Jack came out with it. "We're spending Christmas with my mom in her house," he said, not even looking up from his phone. I paused, Charlie's pacifier halfway to salvation. "Christmas there? With Linda?" The words were sour, just hanging in the air. Jack finally glanced up, eyebrow raised. "Yep, good for the family and all that. High time they all met Charlie, don't you think?" Pulling at the edge of my shirt, already spotted with who knows what, I frowned. "But Charlie's so young, and I'm not up for a road trip, especially in December." He shrugged, scrolling through something undoubtedly important. "Babe, it'll be fine. A bit of cold won't hurt him. Besides, Mom's already planning the whole thing." Heat flared up in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "Doesn't sound like a question, Jack. Did you even consider my say in this? Come on, Alice. It's not up for debate. This is what families do. They get together for the holidays." I shot him a look that could have burned toast. "And usually, they ask, not announce," I snapped. He pocketed the phone and came over, trying to play peacemaker. Hey, I know it's sudden, but think about it. Could smooth things out with Mom." I laughed, but there was no joy in it. "Smooth things out? You mean play house the Linda way or no way?" Jack winced. "That's not fair. You know how much she's been bugging me about visiting." I handed him Charlie, who seemed hellbent on testing his lungs. "She's not the one who has to pack up an infant and deal with your family's drama." Jack bounced Charlie on his knee, a whisper of a smile on his face. "It'll be like an adventure. You love adventures, remember?" That's when the mom glare I'd been perfecting hit him full force. Adventures don't involve feeding schedules and diaper bags. But Jack had that determined look that spelled trouble. "We're going, Alice." End of discussion. I let out a long sigh, nerves frayed. "Fine, but hear this, Jack. We're not going there to be pushed around. I'm serious." He nodded, but there was a trace of something else there. And I won't remember saying yes to this kind of look. "And you're gonna help, right? With the packing, the baby, and dealing with your mom?" Yeah, of course," he said, though he was already picking up his phone again. With a defeated grunt, I moved to start making a list of what to take. Booties, blankets, and the battle gear needed to survive a week with Linda. The moment we stepped into Linda's house, a looming structure that seemed straight out of a ghost story with its creaky floorboards and chilly drafts, I knew we were in for a ride. A sea of faces turned our way, Jack's aunts and uncles, cousins by the dozen, and the venerable queen herself, Linda, holding court. Her eyes skimmed over me like a scanner, resting on our sleeping Charlie, wrapped snug in his blanket. "There's my grandbaby," she exclaimed, her arms outstretched, with a warmth that almost felt real. But as she lifted her gaze to meet mine, the temperature could have dropped 10 degrees. "Alice," she nodded, begrudging respect at best. Jack cleared his throat. "Mom, thanks for having us." The room was buzzing with relatives chatting and the scent of cinnamon and pine. But the festive cheer didn't reach Linda's eyes when she turned back to me. "Hope the drive wasn't too terrible. Roads can be unforgiving this time of year." "It was all right," I returned with a tight smile, clutching Charlie a little closer. "Well, let's not stand here catching a chill, Alice," Linda continued, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. "I would really appreciate it if you could take the lead getting the place shipshape for Christmas." Jack shot me a desperate play nice look while I struggled to find words. "Me? But I've got Charlie too." Linda waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, there will be plenty of hands eager to dote on the boy. Besides, I've seen your Instagram. You've got a knack for this sort of thing." My Instagram, the place where I posted meticulously filtered photos of our home that hid the chaos of reality? I gritted my teeth and forced another smile. "I guess I can give it a go." A look of approval crossed Linda's face, one that didn't reach her eyes. So I dug into box after box of holiday decor, feeling more like Cinderella than a welcomed guest. Jack's family was a loud chorus of advice and backseat decorating, all while passing Charlie around like the season's hottest toy, a living, breathing doll for them to coo over. Jack vanished into the belly of the house, with only the odd shout of "How's it going there?" or "Mom says the garland should go higher," to remind me he was still there. By the time dinner rolled around, the grand old house glittered and shone like something out of a fairy tale where the fairy godmother had taken the day off and left Cinderella to do all the work herself. At the table, loaded with more food than the whole neighborhood could eat, Jack raised his glass in a toast. "To family," he said, smiling. I caught a wink he sent his mother's way. I tried to match their cheer, but fatigue had long since taken the wheel. Jack noticed, but not with the sympathy I needed. "You could have put a bit more tinsel up," he remarked offhandedly between bites. Mom noticed. After a long night chasing the elusive spirit of Christmas at the behest of Linda's pointed directions, all the while keeping a smile plastered on my face for the sake of holiday peace, I retired to our room. Next day I found Jack in what they called the den, but it was more like a wild man cave where Christmas seemed to have thrown up. There he was, sprawled on the couch, a beer in one hand, eyes glued to some game on TV. The sound of sports commentators filled the room. "Jack, we need to talk." My voice was firm, louder than I intended. He glanced up, annoyed at being interrupted. "What's up now?" "It's about yesterday, about everything since we got here." "I'm tired, Jack. And I feel alone in all this." The words spilled out. He scoffed. "Alone? With all my family around? Come on, Alice. You've got to toughen up. This is the big leagues." "I'm not talking about numbers, Jack. Look, your mom, she's piling everything on me, and where are you?" Off the grid the second any work pops up. He rolled his eyes. Not this again. Just do what she says, Alice. That's how it works around here. You'll live. Frustration boiled over. I'm not one of your mom's robots, Jack. I'm your wife, and I'm asking for your help. It's like you don't get it. He let out a laugh. Help? What do you want me to do? Decorate cookies? Hang tinsel? That's kid stuff. Just stick it out. His words stung. Kid stuff? Really? Because last I checked, we're a family too. Or is that kid stuff as well? Jack stood up, his face getting redder. Watch your tone, Alice. Don't start something. The room felt smaller, the walls closer. Start something? No, I'm finishing it, this conversation and your damn free ride. What's your deal, Jack? Too good to help out your own wife? He moved towards the door of the den. I've had enough of this. You knew what you were getting into when you married me. Remember that. I followed him. Yeah, I remember, promises. Support. Respect. Heard of them? But he was already out the door, leaving me talking to a room full of silent trophies and blinking lights. The next day, there wasn't much change. The family was all over the place, and I was still the designated workhorse. Jack avoided me, getting tight with his cousins, laughing too loud over beers and football. I worked, hardly speaking to anyone, especially not Jack. I was too angry, too worn out. And Charlie, bless him, seemed to sense the tension, becoming fussier with each passing hour. In the middle of a diaper change, Charlie crying and clutching at me, one of Jack's aunts walked in. She didn't knock, just barged in with a bucket of soiled linen. Here you go. Add it to the laundry when you can. I looked at her, then at the laundry. I can't right now. Can't you see? She raised her eyebrows, surprisingly bold. It's just laundry, dear. Plus, that's what you're here for, isn't it? To help out? I straightened up, holding Charlie tight against my chest. Just because I married Jack doesn't mean I'm the family maid. She frowned, her own patience wearing thin. Don't be so sensitive. We all do our part here. Yeah. When's Jack's turn? Her face turned sour. Jack? He's catching up with family. Catching up? My voice rose over Charlie's cries. Is that what you call it? She left without another word, but her message was clear, this was on me. I was on my own. I had to shove my way through the crowded store on Christmas Eve, grabbing whatever was left on the shelves. Didn't matter much what it was, anything could be turned into a Christmas dish with enough butter and salt, or so I figured. My phone was buzzing in my pocket the whole time, probably Jack or Linda wondering where I'd got to. But I was too frazzled to answer. Back at the house, I lugged the grocery bags through the snow, my arms about to fall off. Nobody came out to help, of course. I dumped the bags in the kitchen and rolled up my sleeves. The turkey wasn't going to cook itself. The oven felt like a furnace on my face, the heat mixing with my frustration into a kind of steam. As the gravy simmered and the pie crust started to brown, I felt my head spin. I took a seat for a quick breather. Linda stumbled upon me as if I'd planned it, her face twisting into a scowl. What's this? Just sitting around while there's work to be done? Before I could gather my wits to answer, Jack appeared behind her, his tone sharp. Yeah, Alice, what's the deal? We got a timetable here. I just needed a second, I said, the room tilting a little. I'm not feeling too. Oh, save it. Linda cut me off. This family needs team players, not weaklings. If you can't handle it, maybe you shouldn't be here. Jack didn't say a word in my defense, just stood there nodding like a puppet. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I wouldn't let them see. I'm not weak, I shot back, pushing up from the chair. And I don't need this crap, not from you or anyone. Jack's face grew hard. "Watch it, Alice, or you'll be out of here so fast." He let the threat hang between us, heavy as the smell of roasting meat. I bit back a sob, threw on the apron, and turned back to the stove. They left, satisfied that I'd been put in my place. But later that night, after the plates were licked clean and the presents opened, after the laughter and the carols had quieted down, I lay in bed, the silent tears finally falling. They thought I was the weak one, but it was them, all of them. Weak for not helping, weak for not seeing, weak for not caring. Christmas dinner was set up like some kind of fancy spread you'd see in a magazine, except there was one thing off: my seat. It was away from the main table, like I had some sort of disease. I could hear them all, the clinking glasses and the loud laughs from where I was put. I sat there for a moment, staring at the untouched plate. A dry turkey slice stared back at me, the cranberry sauce bleeding into the stuffing like a bad joke. That's when I knew I was done. Finished playing pretend. Charlie was upstairs, asleep in one of the guest rooms. No way was I going to have my kid grow up thinking this nonsense was normal. I stood up, my chair screeching against the floor, louder than I expected. I didn't care. I went upstairs, packed the bags I'd been living out of for what felt like forever, zipped up Charlie's little backpack with his favorite toy and the picture book we read every night. Downstairs, the laughter ticked up a notch. They didn't even see me hauling our lives out of there in 2 trips. The walk to the train station was brutal, the cold cutting through my coat. But each step tugged a little something off my shoulders, a weight I didn't want to carry. At the station, it was empty, the kind of quiet you only get when everyone's at home. I sat there on the bench, Charlie bundled up beside me. "No more of that for us, Charlie," I whispered to him, hoping he was dreaming of something nice, something simple. "Just you and me now." The train rolled in, a lonely hunk of metal that blew hot air out the sides. I picked up Charlie, still asleep, and stepped inside the warmth. The clang of the closing door marked the end of an era as I lugged my bag out of what used to be home. The small bundle that was my baby dozed quietly in my arms, blissfully unaware of the turmoil surrounding us. It was just the 2 of us now, heading into the great unknown. I remember stuffing onesies and diapers haphazardly into the bag. There were no pictures taken off the walls. No second looks. Just the essentials for him and a few clothes for me. Every grab, every zip, felt like a tiny rebellion. Pulling into my parents' driveway was like stepping into a world paused at the brink of joy. They rushed out, my mom's arms wide, my dad's face split with a grin beneath his old, faded cap. "Alice, baby, come in. It's freezing out here." Mom smothered us in one of her bear hugs, the kind that could squeeze the sorrow straight out of your soul, while Dad took care of the bag and the base for the baby carrier. The warmth of the house hit me like a mug of hot cocoa. They had the Christmas tree twinkling, the lights blinking in a slow, sleepy pattern. We settled into the living room, and before I knew it, my mom had a steaming plate of food in front of me and a stocking filled with baby rattles and teething rings. It felt unreal. Laughter filled the air, a stark contrast to the thick silence I'd escaped. The baby stirred in arms, and I kissed him, promising silently that it was going to be different. We were just about to toast, the clink of our glasses ready to sing, when my phone rang, jarring against the melodies of Jingle Bells. I checked the caller ID, Jack. "Hello? Alice, where the hell are you?" It was Jack, his voice a cocktail of anger and confusion. "At my parents'. Where else would I be?" I said, not missing a beat. There was a pause, and then, "You need to come back. This isn't your home anymore." I snorted, the laughter bubbling up from deep within, genuine and loud. "You're joking, right? I'm done with being treated like I'm invisible until you need something. Don't be dramatic. Just get back here. Everyone's asking about you, the dishes are piling up, I cut him off. "Look, listen carefully because I'm only going to say this once. I'm filing for divorce. Got it? I'm not your unpaid maid, Jack, never was. I don't know what made you think I was." The other end of the phone was silent. Then, the dial tone buzzed in my ear. He'd hung up. Mom was looking at me, eyes wide. I hung up the phone and met her gaze straight on. I should have done that years ago, I said. You're staying here tonight, Mom said, solid and sure, the way she'd said things when I was a kid and the world was too big and scary. Yeah, I agreed, feeling the truth in her words. Yeah, I am. Charlie's laughter filtered through from the other room. Let's go celebrate Christmas, I said with a trembling smile. And with the click of the phone, I sealed the decision in the pocket of my jeans, and stepped back into the warmth of the living room where the promise of a peaceful night hung gently in the air, a stark contrast to the storm I had just weathered. Waking up to the same old ceiling crack had become kind of a comfort. The kitchen was already buzzing when I came down. Mom was at the stove, and Dad was half buried in newspaper at the table. Charlie was making a go at a slice of toast, more crumbs decorating his lap than making it into his mouth. Morning, I mumbled, grabbing the pot to pour myself some coffee. Before I got the chance to take a sip, the phone was blaring its old ring from the wall. Dad's eyes met mine. With a hint of a smirk, I answered it, knew who it was before I even said hello. Alice, darling, I need you to come back. Jack's voice came through, half pleading, half like he was ordering a pizza. A man needs his wife. I need you to take care of things here. I almost choked on air, the laugh came out so hard. Jack, honey, you lost the right to need anything from me. But nothing, Jack. I'll send over the divorce papers by the end of the week. You can take care of yourself, or find someone else to boss around. Have a nice life. And with that, I hung up. Mom was staring at me, one eyebrow raised. Everything all right? She asked, a knowing look on her face. Couldn't be better, I said, finally taking that sip of coffee. It was bitter, strong, and hot, just how I needed it. As weeks turned into months, that new chapter in life I'd opened became less about what I'd left behind and more about what was ahead. Divorce papers were signed, delivered, and done with. My bank account got a little heavier with the first round of alimony checks, child support Jack called it, but let's be real, it was guilt money. Either way, it was for Charlie, and that's all that mattered. The job hunt wasn't easy, wasn't hard either. Just a truckload of maybes and a handful of not. One day, sitting at the kitchen table with the want ads, I couldn't help but wonder if begging for jobs was just begging to go back to a life like the one I had with Jack. No, that wasn't for me, not anymore. Why the long face? Dad asked, scrunching up his own as he looked over at me from his chair. Just thinking about work, or the lack of it. You'll find something, he said. You got more backbone than half the blokes at the factory. They should be begging you to work, not t'other way round. That night, with Charlie snoozing away in his crib, I lay awake a little longer than usual, the house quiet except for the distant sound of Mom and Dad talking softly downstairs. Maybe it wasn't the new start I'd imagined, with a new place of my own and a sparkling career. But it was solid ground under my feet. It was my family, my boy, and a future that was mine to shape. No more of Jack's dark clouds on my horizon, no more dancing to someone else's tune. Things have changed since Lily was born. I used to see Mark's face light up when I walked into a room. Now, I'm lucky if I get a grunt before he buries his nose back into his phone. His job's the same, maybe even less stressful than before, but something in him switched off the day we brought her home. Another painting, Grace? What's that, the third this week? Mark's voice would grip the air, sharp and sneering whenever he watched me set up my easel. He used to admire my work, even had my best piece framed in his office once. Not anymore. Yeah, so? It's not like I'm spending your money, I'd answer, trying not to let him see the tremble in my hands, keeping my focus on mixing the blues and yellows on my palette. But inside, each word he volleyed felt like a punch. Could have fooled me. And look at this place. Looks like a damn tornado hit it. He'd scan the room, his eyes scanning every toy and blanket out of place, holding them up like evidence of my failures. Look, I'm with Lily all day, and she's a handful, I'd fight back, my voice not as steady as I'd liked. And maybe if you helped a little around here. Help? With what? You're home all the time, you deal with it. That was our deal, remember? I make the cash, you handle the rest. Not my fault you can't manage, he'd cut me off, leaving no room for argument. Every night ended the same, with him turning away and dismissing me with a scoff. When he left for work, Lily would tug at the hem of my shirt, her little eyes confused. "Daddy mad?" she would ask, her tiny lips quivering at the thought. "No, baby, Daddy just has a lot on his mind. Here, help Mommy choose the colors, yeah?" I'd pull her into my arms, trying to smile for her sake, guiding her hand to pick out colors. Together, we'd paint, and for a while, the bitterness in Mark's tone would get drowned out by her laughter and our shared world of color. I knew my paintings were good, not because I was full of myself, but because they were the only thing I had left from a time when I felt confident, vibrant. That evening, when Mark came home, I did what I always did. I tried to greet him with a warm dinner, a clean house, and Lily squeaky from her bath and dressed in her best pajamas. "Hey," I said, the smell of roast chicken trailing behind me. "How was your day?" He grunted in reply, shrugging off his coat and throwing it over the couch. His eyes caught mine, then the easel set up in the corner of our living room. "Still haven't gotten rid of that junk, huh?" "It's not junk, Mark. I'm working on something," I responded, the weariness seeping through. "Looks like a waste of time. And money. You could be doing something productive, you know." He walked past me to the fridge, not waiting for an answer. Productive seemed to mean anything that made money or made his life easier. I wasn't doing either to his liking, I guessed. "I am doing something," I said, my voice firmer now. "I'm raising our daughter and keeping our home. And I'm trying to hang on to something that matters to me. My painting matters to me, Mark." He didn't even pause, just popped open a beer and drank deeply. "Call it what you want, Grace. To me? Looks like you're just filling time, making a mess I'll have to pay someone to clean up." I felt the sting. Not from the unkindness of the words, I was getting used to that, but from the dismissal of my dreams, my passion. There wasn't a place for them in Mark's world anymore. "Dinner's ready," I called out, in what felt like a weekly performance, standing with quivering hands as I served the meal. Mark's parents, seated like judges at the head of the table, barely noticed my effort to create a warm, hearty meal. Their eyes were fixed on the easel by the window. "What's this then?" Mark's dad, George, a broad man with a voice that filled the room, jabbed a finger towards my unfinished painting. "Oh, that's just something Grace has been fooling around with," Mark chuckled, waving a dismissive hand before taking his seat. "Real high-class stuff, right?" Laughter rang out, and it twitched at my nerves, laughter that didn't reach their eyes. My, we're an artist now, are we?" chimed in Mark's mom, Patricia, her voice a kind of sharp that could slice steel. "Why don't you show us your latest masterpiece, dear?" George bellowed, his smile more of a challenge than a gesture of interest. I stood, rooted to the spot, feeling the flesh spread up my neck. "It's not done yet," I muttered, but Mark was already striding over to the canvas, grabbing it with less care than he'd take with a dish towel. "Look at this, folks," Mark laughed, flipping the canvas around like he was Vanna White revealing a letter on Wheel of Fortune. "It's supposed to be a landscape, can you believe it?" George's laughter bloomed loud again. "Looks like a blind dog's nightmare." Patricia tooted, shaking her head, her nostrils flaring with each chortle. "Why waste your time with this hobby? Get a job or do something, anything, productive." As if any place would hire her, Mark snorted, setting the painting back with a thud that made my heart sink. "The job market's tough out there, and well, look at her." I swallowed, hard. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. "I do plenty. I take care of Lily, and this house, and—" My words faltered under their collective stare. Patricia poked at the food with her fork as if she suspected it was poisoned. "Taking care of your family is the least you can do," she sniffed, but honestly, Mark, if you'd married someone with a little ambition. They went on, tearing strips off me with every word, while I just stood there. The room closed in, their words pressing on my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. I felt myself slipping away, becoming smaller, insignificant in this grand performance of theirs. Something in me snapped. As soon as the meal ended, with a fake tremor in my voice, I excused myself, marched up the stairs, not looking back, and locked myself in the bedroom. Grace? Mark's voice climbed up the stairs, maybe half an hour later, cracking through the door. You coming back down? We need to clear the table. I didn't respond. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, a scream or a sob would have come out, and I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of hearing my break. I scrolled through my bank app, a frown etching deeper lines on my face. Our account was looking dire again this month, and the grocery list wasn't getting any shorter. Lily needed new shoes, too. She was sprouting like a weed. Mark's voice tumbled in from the living room. Grace, why is there a charge for $48.95 for Martin's art supplies? Just picked up a few things, I said, tapping through the app to transfer what remained of my personal savings to cover it. I needed them. Needed? Come on, Grace. That's money we could have put towards something important, isn't it? His voice was flat, bored even, with a hint of something else. Was it disappointment, frustration? I sighed. Art is important to me, Mark. The same way your golf is important to you. I didn't mention the fact that his golf clubs cost more than a year's worth of my supplies. Yeah, but golf is networking, it's part of my job. What does your painting get us? A cluttered house and wasted cash, he said, grumbling. It gets me through the day, I murmured, feeling that old, familiar tug-of-war in my chest. Mark snorted. Through the day? We have to be smart about money, not just spend it on whatever gets us through the day. Budget, Grace. Budget. That word felt like a choke chain. I pay for my art supplies with my own money, Mark. The money I had before. I trailed off, not wanting another fight. My before was a long-gone chapter, one that contained a job, independence, and a once-shared dream of my own gallery. Your money's our money, isn't it? He shot back, the insinuation that my financial independence was history, clear in his tone. And that your money is running out fast. What then? Later at the store, I chose the cheaper brands, counting every cent, every compromise. With the rest, I bought the smallest tubes of paint, the ones I could slip into the cart without raising eyebrows. Back home, I unpacked the bags with robotic precision, every item a testament to our tightrope walk above financial ruin. Putting back some luxuries, are we? Mark commented, his gaze landing on the no-name cereal and store-brand pasta. Yes, tightening the belt, I answered without looking at him, hiding the receipts, a paper trail of my crimes. He hummed, rummaging through the bags like an investigator looking for a slip-up. Where are the Greek yogurts you like? And isn't this the cheap coffee? I shrugged, busying myself with placing a can of tomatoes in the pantry. Prices went up. Had to make some cuts. Don't see any cuts in your art budget, though, he said, a cold finger pointing out the new brushes I'd slipped under a loaf of bread. I turned to him, meeting his eyes for the first time since the conversation began. This keeps me sane, Mark. My art keeps me sane. My voice was firm, and I clenched my fist around the countertop to stop the shake in my hand. Well, sanity's quite the luxury item these days, eh? He nodded towards the brushes, his words deliberate, biting. That night, I painted not out of passion, but frustration. Each stroke was a challenge, a cut from our personal budget to fit it within the constraints of Mark's expectations. But as I worked, I remembered a time when these brushes were a joy to hold, not a weapon I had to defend. Mark was somewhere across the country, tangled up in business trip meetings when he decided to drop the latest task on me. His voice buzzed through my phone, sounding like he was already out the door before he even finished his sentence. Grace, you gotta pull together a birthday present for my boss's wife, Clara. Her big day's in a week. Okay, do you have any cash set aside for that? I asked, squinting at our already tight budget on my laptop screen. Nah, you figure it out. Just make it look like we put some thought into it, he muttered, sounding distracted. Hang on, you want something nice, but I'm supposed to magic up the funds for it? I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. You always find a way. Make it happen, Grace. And with that cheery little line, he was gone. I let out a long, slow breath, closing my eyes and trying to push back the frustration gnawing at my last nerve. Didn't have the cash, but I needed something that would knock Clara's socks off. No pressure, right? After a deep dive into Clara's online world, it was clear she had a thing for art. Her feed was full of gallery visits, pictures of canvases that probably cost more than our car. She even had photos with artists, talked about supporting the arts, patronage and all that jazz. An idea sparked, and I grabbed it before it could blaze out of my mind. A painting, from me. I had the paints. I had the canvas. I sure as hell had the motive. I'd give Clara something no one else could, not off some high street. I spun the idea in my mind, letting it settle. I could picture the brush strokes already, feel the drag of bristles against canvas. It would be personal, and it'd be free. Bonus. A painting, then. Decision made. I was going to need every minute of every day if it was going to look anything like the kind of stuff Clara posted. I pulled out my old easel, set it up in the living room, and got to work. All the while, fingers crossed that my little slice of creativity would cut it in the high-stakes world of business birthday gifts. Day 1 postmarks bombshell. I'm standing in the middle of my makeshift studio, a corner of the dining room I've cleared out, pushing the table against the wall. The morning light streaming in, kinda highlighting the chaos of my art supplies spread all over. Mommy, what's all this? Lily, my 6-year-old, parks herself right in the middle of the chaos, her eyes as round as the splattered paint drops on the floor. Mommy's gotta make a birthday present, baby. I reply, rifling through old brushes with bristles stiffer than my back feels. For who? She picks up a brush, examining the crusty edges like a pro. For a lady Daddy works with, I explain, snatching the brush from her before it becomes a makeshift sword or fairy wand. Lily's forehead scrunches up in confusion. But why can't Daddy buy something? Lily, go watch your cartoons, will ya? I need to think. I'm not in the mood to unpack the complexities of our bank account or my marriage to a kindergartner. Grumbling something under her breath, sounding too much like me for comfort, she trots off to the living room, leaving me to my quandary. The week grinds by. I'm pulling double shifts, daytime mommy, nighttime Picasso. The canvas starts to fill, taking on a life of its own. Something abstract, something that feels kind of like the whirlwind that's my life lately. I don't hear a peep from Mark. No check-in calls, not even a text asking how it's going. Guess he's too wrapped up in his charts and deals, and whatever he does that's too important to ring his wife. Lily, on the other hand, is my tiny shadow, always creeping back to watch me paint. You're really good, Mommy, she says on what, day 4? You should draw stuff more. I smile because that's probably the best review I'll ever get. Think so, huh? Maybe I will. The night before the big reveal, the painting's finally staring back at me, done. It's not just art, it's everything I haven't been able to say or do, all poured out onto canvas. I can't sleep that night, tossing and turning, thoughts swirling in my head. What if Clara hates it? What if Mark thinks I've wasted my time? What if? But the morning comes, clear and bright. The painting's wrapped up, no fancy paper, just brown parcel stuff, but neat. A nice bow from Lily's hair ribbons, because why not? So, there I was, at the boss's wife's birthday bash, my arms wrapped tight around a package, the painting I hoped would be a hit. I slid through the crowd, eyes low, wishing I could blend into the wallpaper. Mark was there too, just flown in hot from his latest trip, looking every inch the man who had it all, except the picture-perfect trophy wife. His eyes swept over the women, polished and perfect in their cocktail dresses, then landed on me like a ton of bricks. I saw that look on his face, like he just bit into a lemon. He looked me up and down and shook his head just enough so only I'd notice. The room faded a bit, like someone turned down the volume on the party, and all I could hear was my heartbeat in my ears. Then his gaze zeroed in on the parcel, all wrapped up and nestled in my shaky grip. His eyes flashed, and oh boy, I knew that look. I saw the storm brewing before the first word even shot out. "What's that?" he spat, barely keeping a lid on it. I pulled the package closer, as if I could shield it, and me, from what was coming. "It's a gift. My painting." The words barely had a chance to hang in the air before his voice boomed. "A painting? You're kidding, right?" It was loud enough to catch a few glances our way. I tried to shush him with my eyes, but he was past caring. "You actually think this is okay? To hand her a piece of amateur hour?" The whispers around us started like the start of a rain, soft but getting stronger. "Mark, please, not here," I begged, my cheeks flaming up something fierce. "Did you lose your mind?" he roared, and the room didn't just pause, it froze. "You make us look like fools." By now, we were the main event. Eyes flicked to us, then away, then back again like they were watching tennis. I shrank, wished I could melt right into the floorboards. His face was a shade of red I'd only ever seen on traffic lights. "Great, just great, Grace," he vented, throwing his hands up. "You don't think, do ya?" The heat in my face told me I was blushing, and not in a cute way. My hands shook, but I hugged the painting tighter, 'cause what else was there to hang on to? I took a breath, tried to remember why I thought this was a good idea. "Now everyone's gonna have a go at us, thanks to you and your dumb idea," he added, sharp as a knife, for anyone still pretending they weren't listening. My mouth opened, words ready to tumble out, to defend or maybe just to tell him to put a sock in it. But what was there to say with the whole room's eyes burning holes into us? Instead, I just stood there, the fool he called me, wishing the ground would do me a favor and swallow me whole. The laughter after Mark's outburst felt like daggers. Even with the room spinning, I caught the boss's eye. He was just watching, all quiet, with something like confusion on his face. And his wife, Clara, she had this half-concerned, half-intrigued frown that actually gave me a sliver of hope. Clara waved a hand, cutting through the noise. "Quiet down, everyone. Let's see what Grace has brought." I moved on autopilot, my hands still a bit jittery as they tore the paper from the canvas. The art kinda just spilled out into the room, all the colors and the shapes I'd spent nights pouring myself into. Clara's eyebrows shot up. "Oh my," she said, and the room hushed like they were waiting for her to drop the hammer. But then she continued, "This is quite something, Grace." Mark was still fuming by my side. "Yeah, something all right." I ignored him and searched Clara's face for some sign. It's for you," I mumbled. "Happy birthday?" She tilted her head, studying the painting like it was a puzzle. "It's bold. I like bold. Don't you, darling?" She nudged her husband, pulling him into this. The boss was a tough guy to read, but he nodded. "Don't see something like that every day." Mark tried to jump back in. "Oh, come on, you're saying you like this mess?" And there it was, the snap in Clara's voice as she turned to him with a squint. "Mark, I'd watch it if I were you. Your wife has talent, and I won't have you embarrass her any further. It's unbecoming." The room fell into this tense, kind of quiet, the kind where you could hear someone sneeze 3 houses down. "Look at the colors, the feeling in it," Clara was saying now. "It's got life." Mark tried for a save. "Well, sure, if you like that sort of thing." But Clara cut him off. "I do. It's decided. This goes right in the foyer." I blinked. Was this actually happening? "You sure, babe?" the boss chimed in. "It's not exactly." Clara shot him a look, and he trailed off. "Standard. Right. It's unique." Her arm shot out to me, a beacon in the high heels and overpriced suit. "See? Thank you, Grace. This here's a real gift, folks. It's got soul." And just like that, the murmurs started up again, but they had a different tune. People were nodding, some even looking at me with what felt like respect. Clara, still holding my painting like it was a treasure, turned her eyes on me again. "So, Grace," she said, drawing the room's focus, "ever thought about showing your work? Like in a gallery?" Mark let out a scoff. I heard it, but my eyes were glued to Clara. "Nah, who'd want to see my stuff?" "Don't worry, Grace. I would. And I know people." Clara's voice was firm, her eyes sharp. Mark tried to laugh it off. "Come on, Clara, she's just dabbling." Clara quirked an eyebrow at him. "So she dabbles better than some pros I know. What's it to you?" I swallowed, feeling like I was teetering on the edge of something big. I don't know. I've never. What's to know? You jump in. I'll help. Right? Clara's look said she wasn't asking, she was telling. A giggle slipped from me. It was nervous, a bit wild-sounding even to my own ears. "Sure. Right." Clara beamed. "Good. It's settled then." After that, whispers flitted around like moths to a flame. People who barely gave me the time of day were now hanging on my arm, talking about my work. It felt surreal, like walking through someone else's life. Mark was suddenly there again, his hand on my back almost scalding. "You're not serious about this, are you?" There was that edge in his voice, like a knife threatening to cut. I turned to him, feeling the weight of the crowd, the pull of something new. "Yeah, I am." My voice was stronger than it had felt in years. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time that night. "But, what about us?" "What about us, Mark?" I repeated. "We've been over for a longer time than I want to admit." That shook him. He stepped back. "I thought we were fine." I turned to face him fully. "You thought wrong." The words were colder than I intended, but they needed to be said. Mark ran a hand through his hair, looking beaten. "So what, we just end it?" I looked down at the color splashed across the nails on my fingers, at the rings that didn't mean what they were supposed to anymore. "We ended it a long time ago. Now we're just making it official." He didn't have anything to say to that. I watched him walk away, his shoulders hunched. Clara's hand touched my shoulder. "You okay, hon?" I nodded. "I am. Thanks to you." She winked. "What are friends for, right? And you, Grace?" She paused, giving my shoulder a squeeze. "You're going to light up this town with your art. Just you wait." And with that, I felt my heart start to hammer for a whole new set of reasons. Ahead of me, there wasn't just an ending. There was a beginning, and it was painted in the boldest colors I could imagine. Lily and I? We'd be more than fine. We'd be us, unapologetically, unfalteringly us. Hey there, my name is Rose. I'm the one you don't hear about in those family photos where everyone's smiling like they don't have a care in the world. I got a sister, Lucy. She's been the star of the show since the day she was born. Little Miss Perfect, right? And me, I'm basically the backstage crew in my own life. But enough about that. So, let me paint you a picture. It's the morning of my 10th birthday. I'm at the breakfast table, thinking maybe today, things will be different. Dad's munching on his toast, buried in a newspaper. Mom's fluttering around, and Lucy's there, eyes all wide and innocent. I'm waiting for some pancakes, maybe a happy birthday, you know, the usual birthday jazz. That's when Lucy, all sweet-like, starts to cry. Through her tears, she goes, "Rose pushed me, and I hurt my knee." I'm standing there, jaw on the floor. What? No, I didn't. But Dad just peers over his paper, frowning like I'd spilled his coffee, and Mom, well, she's already knee-deep in Band-Aids for Lucy. "You gotta be kinder to your sister, Rose," Mom lectures, no room for buts. But you heard your mom, Dad cuts in. And just like that, end of story. No pancakes. Lucy's whimpering turns into a sly grin the moment they're not looking. Birthday cancelled on account of sibling drama, courtesy of yours truly. Fast forward to Christmas that year. I wake up thinking maybe this time I'll score some decent loot. We're around the tree, and Lucy's tearing through her presents like a tornado. New phone and fancy threads. I find my name on a package, rip it open. Socks. And some dollar store alarm clock. I mean, come on. Later, I'm sitting on the porch, skipping rocks on the sidewalk. Grandma Joan finds me there, hands me a cup of hot cocoa like she always does when the world gives me the cold shoulder. Thanks, Grandma. I manage, trying not to sound as grumpy as I felt. High school was no different. Lucy had the looks, the friends, I had acne and a job at Sal's Pizzeria. Worked my tail off, got those grades, and I'm thinking, this is gonna be my ticket out, right? There's this one night, senior year, college brochures spread out on the kitchen table like a bad hand of cards. Dad's fixing the sink, Mom's doing her Sudoku, and I'm about to lay my cards down, tell them about the colleges wanting to throw scholarships my way. I'm all, there's this college outstayed dash. Money's tight, Rose, Dad says straight off, not even looking up. We're looking at community options. I shoot a look at Mom for some backup. She doesn't look up from her puzzle. We're saving for your sister's college fund. That's when Grandma Joan steps in, real quiet. She talks to Dad first, then Mom. It's not pretty, but when she's done, she's got that check for me, pressed it into my hand like a secret handshake. Make it count, kiddo, she says, eyes all fierce. And that was it. That check was my golden ticket, my ride far away from socks, alarm clocks, and Lucy's messes. Out of the circus, just like Joan said. As soon as my feet hit the campus of that outstate college, it was like I could finally breathe. No more Lucy, no more comparisons, no more feeling like an afterthought. I was my own person here, and that was all kinds of liberating. So yeah, I dug into those law books like they were the only things keeping me grounded. I was at the library more than I was at my own dorm room. Came to know every coffee stain on those tables like they were my personal constellation of caffeine. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Money was tight. I remember this one time at the campus grocery store, counting coins from my pocket for a week's worth of ramen. The cashier was tapping her nails, looking bored out of her mind. You gonna pay or what? She drawled, popping her gum. I was a dime short. A freaking dime. Hold on, I mumbled, searching my pockets for a coin that wasn't there. That's when this guy behind me sighed loudly and threw a quarter on the counter. Here, keep the change, he grunted. Embarrassing? Yeah, you bet. But it was also the day I met Mike, who turned out to be a fellow law student and a bit of a smartass. A friend, something I hadn't had a lot of. In the grind between classes and part-time jobs, Mike and I stuck together. He was as plain-spoken as they come, didn't have patience for show-offs or slackers. Wasn't the type to sugarcoat feedback on my mock trial performances either. You gotta stop sounding like you're asking permission to be fierce, he'd say. You know this stuff, Rose. Act like it. And I took that to heart. By the time I was sitting for the bar exam, I felt like I was carving my own path, laying down the law, you know? I wasn't Rose, Lucy's sister. I was just Rose, soon to be Rose, ESQ. At the firm, things were different. I had to prove myself again, but this time it was on my own terms. The partners, they were a mixed bag, some welcoming, some wary of the new blood. I remember being cornered by one of the senior partners, Bill, during my first week. So, you're Joan's granddaughter, he stated more than asked, eyebrows up like he discovered gold. Yeah, how'd you know? I was wary, keeping my answers short and my guard up. Bill chuckled, Joan and I fought in the same trenches once. She mailed me your resume. Said you had grit. I'd have groaned if it didn't feel like a small victory. Grandma Joan, still my one-woman fan club. In that firm, I made it known I wasn't there to ride anyone's coattails. I worked cases like they were puzzles only I could solve. In the courtroom, it was another world. I wasn't the kid sister or the overlooked daughter. I was fierce. Mike's words came back to me, about not asking for permission. If the glove doesn't fit, I'd say, cutting through the noise, then you must acquit. Simple, easy, nothing too fancy, to the point. It worked. So yeah, I escaped. From family expectations, from always being second best. I made it on my own terms. And it felt like freedom, hard, exhausting, but undeniably mine. It all started at the courthouse steps where I bumped into Tom, literally. Papers and apologies flying everywhere. He was there to support his buddy. I was on my first case. We laughed it off, grabbed coffee, and it turned out we could talk for hours. He was a contractor, not bothered by my legal jargon, just easygoing and genuine. Before I knew it, we were inseparable. When we decided to get married, the plan was no fuss, just us and the people we loved, sharing a good time. That plan didn't stand a chance once my family entered the picture. "It's nice," Mom would say, dabbing the corner of her eye, but her tone adding a silent "but." Dad just patted my shoulder, a silent solidarity that didn't quite warm me. And Lucy? She had to make an entrance, even if it wasn't her day. She arrived in a dress so flashy you'd think she was the one getting married. But I bit my tongue. It was my wedding day, and I wasn't gonna let her rain on my parade. At least that was the plan. Tom, he was a champ about it. Meeting my sister, he just gave me that look. Wow, she doesn't hold back, does she? I wanted to bury my head in my bouquet. You have no idea. The guests started piling in, and for a moment, it looked like it might actually be a good day. That's when Lucy decided she wasn't getting enough attention. "You're just going to ignore me? On your wedding day?" She was almost shrieking, eyes darting around hoping someone would sympathize with her. I took a deep breath, counted to 5 in my head. I was done being the peacemaker. "Lucy, not today. Please." She huffed, tossing her hair. "Whatever. I give it a year anyway." Mom shot me a warning glance, like it was my job to fix it. As usual. But something in me snapped. This was my day. Mine and Tom's. I wasn't going to let Lucy or anyone else mess with that. "Get out," I repeated, and my voice didn't even shake. Lucy looked at me with wide eyes, kind of like she did when we were kids, and I'd finally stand up to her nonsense. "What did you just say?" "I'm done with your drama. This is my wedding, and you're not gonna spoil it." She sputtered, red in the face now. "But I'm family." "So? Family doesn't pull this kind of crap, Lucy. Not today. Not at my wedding." Mom tried to intervene. "Rose, don't do this, she's just..." I cut her off. "No, Mom. Enough is enough." Lucy's face was a storm cloud, and she looked ready to argue. But this time she didn't. Maybe it was the way I stood, maybe it was Tom's hand in mine, or maybe it was the crowd of guests watching the drama unfold. For once, Lucy didn't have a comeback. She just turned and strutted out, heels clicking against the pavement like a judge banging a gavel. The rest of the day went by in a blur. I said "I do," we kissed, and I've never felt so much like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not Lucy's shadow, not my parents' second choice, but Rose. Just Rose. And that was more than enough. Okay, so get this, a month in, post-wedding drama, and Lucy pulls a Houdini. Total ghost town where she used to be, right? Scoots out of town leaving behind nothing but a crummy note. And guess who's the villain in her sob story? Yup, yours truly. Turns out her exit strategy includes playing the blame game, and I'm it. Her note? Classic Lucy, painting her runaway act with a bunch of bull about how I've done her wrong. Like she's the fragile flower and I'm the big bad wolf. At the next family dinner, the air's so thick with tension you could cut it with a knife. Mom's at the head of the table, flinging accusatory glances my way like she's dealing cards at a high-stakes poker game. "Rose, how could you let it come to this?" she starts, and I can feel the showdown brewing. "Dunno, Mom. Maybe 'cause I ain't the warden in Lucy's personal prison," I shoot back. "I'm not in the mood for a guilt trip, that's for sure." Dad chimes in, voice laced with that don't rock the boat tone. "Your sister thinks you never gave her a break. That's serious." "Are you kidding me?" I can feel my temper flaring, words hot on my tongue. "After everything, you're gonna take her side? Based on what, a damn piece of paper?" That's when Granny, sweet Granny who always had my back, pipes up with a voice like thunder. "Rose! Your sister's out there alone, scared, and it's your doing." "You too, Granny?" I couldn't believe my ears. "Since when do you buy this load of crap?" Her eyes got all misty. "Your ways pushed her to it, Rose. You're not innocent." That was a gut punch. I've been looking out for her since diapers, and this is the thanks I get? The old lady was on a roll though. "No excuses, girl. You've got a heart, use it." The whole clash was absurd. There we were, a family tearing into each other over Lucy's concocted tale. Even Granny, who'd never once doubted me, was singing a different tune, and boy, did it sting. I stormed out of there, the room thick with unsaid things. Granny's betrayal cut deep, but what cut deeper was knowing I'd stood up for myself. I was done being anybody's villain, especially not in Lucy's crafty escape act. If they wanted to believe her over me, that was on them. Tom's been acting off, real off. All those late nights at the office, trips out of town every other week, big projects he can't talk about. Yeah, right. Man's as subtle as a brick through a window. And then, like fate's trying to tell me something, I catch a glimpse of something red peeking out from his jacket pocket while I'm on laundry duty. A receipt for some fancy women's shop. No way was that for me. I didn't confront him. What's the point when you know you'll get nothing but half-truths topped with lies? I decided I'd do it the smart way, let someone else do the digging. Yeah, I called up a private eye, got him tasked on tailing Tom, seeing what really goes down when he's working overtime. Jimmy's the name of the PI, seems like he's been in the game long enough to see everything twice. Just want the straight shot, I told him, no chasing ghosts. He gave me a nod that said as clear as day, I got this. So I wait. Days feel like weeks when you're waiting for a bomb to drop. I keep things normal at home, or make a damn good show of it. Every time Tom tells me he's got to work late again, I nod, smile, and say something like, "Don't work too hard, babe." One night, he's at it again. "Gotta finish up some things at the office, you know how it is." I shrug, playing it cool on the outside, but inside, my mind's racing. "Sure, Tom. Don't forget to eat something. Wouldn't want you wasting away." He gives me a peck on the cheek and he's out the door, and I'm left feeling like I'm on some warped episode of a TV show where the wife's the last to know. I try focusing on a book, some cooking show, but who am I kidding? My head's not in it. Instead, I'm thinking about that receipt. That damn piece of paper that feels like it's burning a hole through the fabric of our little suburban life. Finally, I get a text. Not from Tom, but from Jimmy. My stomach drops when I see his name flash up on my phone. I don't open it. Not yet. Can't bring myself to. Whatever's in that message, it's gonna turn my world upside down. Instead, I pour myself a glass of wine, let the cool liquid settle my nerves. They say ignorance is bliss, but I passed that exit miles back. I have to look. I pick up the phone, thumb hovering over the screen, and then I press. But Jimmy's text isn't the full picture. It's just to say he's on the case, got some leads. We'll know more soon, he writes. That's it, then. No turning back now. Tom's little secrets are on borrowed time, and when the truth comes out, I'll be ready. There's something liberating about it, knowing that I'm no longer in the dark, playing the doting wife, smiling while something rotten's eating away at my marriage. Grandma Joan and I hadn't been seeing eye to eye recently, but the envelope stuffed with the PI's evidence was burning a hole in my bag and my conscience. Deep down, I knew she was the only one who could give me the straight talk I needed without sugarcoating the jagged pill I was about to swallow. I knocked on the door, and it swung open, revealing Grandma Joan with her arms folded, looking as staunch as ever. "Took you long enough," she said, without a hello. I let out a breath that I had been holding in longer than I realized. "Yeah, well, I'm here now." We sat down at the kitchen table, the same one we'd shared more Sunday dinners at than I could count. But today, it wasn't a warm roast that lay between us, but a file filled with photos and texts. "I've got something to say," I started, but she cut me off with a sharp wave of her hand. "Save it," she said. "I can guess why you're here, and I don't need an apology." I narrowed my eyes, ready for a quarrel, but her face softened. "What's done is done. Let's just hear what you've got." So, I spilled it, all of it. The late nights Tom pulled, the lies that didn't add up. "Do you have proof?" she asked, eyes piercing through me like she could see the answers scribbled across my heart. "It's all here," I said, tapping the envelope. She reached out and I handed it over, but she didn't open it. Instead, she looked me straight in the eyes. "You know this doesn't change anything between us, right? Family is family." That's when it hit me. Whatever had come between us, whatever words we'd exchanged that we couldn't take back, none of it mattered now. Not with this storm on the horizon. "You're right," I answered. "It doesn't change a thing. I still need you, Grandma." "Good," she grinned, but there was a seriousness in her eyes that wasn't usually there. "Because I need you too. And let me tell you, whatever's in that envelope," she tapped it and slid it back towards me, "it doesn't define who you are or what you're worth." We sat there for a while, not saying much, just being together. It felt like the air had cleared. The storm clouds were still there, but now, I wasn't going to weather them alone. Later, when I went to leave, Grandma Joan gave me a tight squeeze. "You call me, you hear? Day or night. We'll figure this out." I pulled back and looked at her. "I will. And thanks, Grandma, for everything." As I walked away, the envelope heavy in my bag, I felt lighter somehow. My steps were more certain, my spine straighter. Whatever Tom was up to, whatever the PI had uncovered, I was ready to face it. With my grandma at my back, I felt like I could face just about anything. A month had whipped by and there we were, gathered in the stiff parlor of Grandma's house, me, Mom, Dad, and my husband, Tom. An odd quiet hung in the air as the lawyer got ready to dish out the details of the will. Just the family scene you'd expect, except for the empty spot where Grandma used to be. And then, like out of some crappy soap opera, in prances my sister, Lucy, all dolled up and smirking like she's just won the jackpot on a scratch card. Mom and Dad, tears in their eyes, fuss over her like she's just returned from war, not the two-bit runaway act she'd pulled. I stayed put, my hands clenched into fists under the table. I wasn't about to give her my piece yet. She swans up to Tom, bold as brass, and plants one on him. "My Tom." As if that wasn't gag-worthy enough, she starts spouting off this garbage about how she'd cooked up this whole mess. I made it all happen that Grandma would bequeath her property to me, not to the villainous Rose. Lucy gloats, thumbing at Grandma's portrait with a grin that made my blood boil. And I also took her husband away from Rose. Mom's sobbing, Dad's face is ghost white, and there's Tom, cheek to cheek with the snake, both of them looking like they've got the secret to the universe. "We have the last laugh," he says, voice slippery with that grin plastered all over his face. The room's buzzing with their confidence, them thinking they've got it all sewn up. Grandma's gone, and in their mind, her house, her savings, all her bits and bobs were theirs for the taking. They didn't see me smile. The lawyer, a guy with less flair than a wet match, starts talking. "So, as per Mrs. Joan Holloway's last will and testament," the lawyer drones, "and here it comes. The entirety of her estate, her home, her financial assets, and her personal effects are to be left to." I already see Lucy reaching out, like she could already touch the velvet of Grandma's antique chairs. Her granddaughter, Rose Marie Kendrick, provided. Lucy's hand hangs there, midair, and the smirks melt off her and Tom's faces faster than ice cream in July. She agrees to use these assets for the continuation of the local community garden which Mrs. Holloway was fond of. The lawyer finishes with no fanfare. The silence is thick enough to cut. Mom and Dad look between me and Lucy, their tears dry now, replaced with something else. Confusion? Betrayal? Both? Finally, I break the quiet. Well, I guess that's that, huh? Lucy's mouth zips shut, all tight lines, and Tom, he's paler than a ghost, his eyes not meeting anyone's. You wouldn't believe the circus that unfolded after the will reading. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, distant relatives suddenly remembering my name. But me? I kept it tight. It wasn't about the drama, it was about staying 3 steps ahead. So, what's the plan now, Rose? Tom asked with that rat-like twitch of his lip, trying to sound all sweet and concerned. We were standing in Grandma's kitchen, a place where I'd shucked more corn than anyone's business. I leaned back against the counter, feeling the cool marble against my spine. Well, Tommy boy, first up, I'm changing the locks. His eyes darted like he'd been zapped. But, what about us? He stammered, like he hadn't been caught red-handed. I chuckled, low and steady. Us? Oh, darling, us jumped ship the moment you cozy up to my sis just to get a piece of the pie. There were papers in my handbag, crisp and just waiting for his signature. Divorce papers, my ticket out of this mess. The PI snaps, the texts, the late-night calls. I had it all. My hand was stacked, and they didn't even know we were playing cards. Lucy's eyes flicked between us, sensing the shift in the air. She was like a cat that got caught sneaking a pawn to the fishbowl. You can't kick him out. We have rights. Rights? I arched an eyebrow, amused at her guts. Sweetheart, after what I found out, the only right you're gonna need is the right to a good lawyer. Tom's face was pale, eyes darting to the door, probably scheming his next escape. But there was nowhere for him to run. Not this time. I felt the weight of the house keys in my pocket, the grooves grounding me. This was more than just a will, it was Grandma speaking from beyond, telling me to tidy up the trash that clung to her legacy. I walked over to Tom and handed him the papers. Sign these, and we can at least pretend you walked away with a shred of dignity. He snatched them up, his hands shaking like he was in a snowstorm without a coat. His signature scribbled across the page was the scribble of a defeated man. Lucy was seething. You think you've won? She hissed, her voice a strained whisper. I smiled, genuine and clear. Honey, this ain't about winning. This is checkmate. You played dirty, and you lost. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a garden to tend to and a life to live. With that, I left them there, in the dust of their greed, in the kitchen filled with memories of sugar cookies and laughter, a kitchen that would soon echo with new stories. No more whys, no regrets, just me, my begonias, and a fresh start. I'm Goldie. Picture this, I'm 30, hitched to a solid guy, Alex. He's got the reins of this family gig, a trading company that's been in his bloodline since before I was even an idea. I land a gig there not long after we tie the knot, slinging deals as a sales agent. And guess what? Figures shot through the roof the minute I started. Alex gets a kick out of it, always cracks the same joke. Babe, you didn't just bring love, you hauled in the big bucks too. So, there's your fairy tale start, right? But life's got a funny way of throwing you curveballs. Now, Mary, the mother-in-law, she's a piece of work, you know? And Cynthia, her daughter, she prances around like she's Queen Bee because she's got some fancy letters behind her name. It's my first dinner at their place, and I'm all dolled up, trying to make a good impression. We're sitting there, around this table that's too big for any sort of cozy conversation, and the third degree starts. So, Goldie, Mary starts, peering at me like I'm some specimen under a microscope. Which college did you grace with your presence? I tell her straight, went to state. Got my degree and learned a ton about the real world. She snorts, and there's this moment, brief as a heartbeat, where I see Cynthia trying to hide her own sneer. State, Mary echoes, like it tastes bad just saying it. And Cynthia, oh, she jumps right in, smug as a cat in the cream. An MBA from Harvard on my end, she flaunts, leaning back with this smirk that got under my skin in a real quick minute. I'm not one to back down, so I shoot back, cool, but it's what you got up here. I tap my head. That matters, not where you sat on your butt getting it. Their chuckles go cold, but I don't give a toss. I'm not there to play doormat to their uptown attitudes. Dinner wraps up, and I'm thinking, okay, rocky start, but we can smooth this over, right? Wrong. Next thing I know, Alex is getting an earful from Mary about how Cynthia, the golden child, should join us at the company. And it ain't just any old job she's vying for, she's shotgunning straight for my department's top spot. Well, she has an MBA from Harvard, Alex, Mary presses, stating the obvious like it's some trump card. She's perfect for head of sales. And what's nuttier is Alex actually caves. Before I can even protest, it's a done deal. Cynthia waltzes in like she owns the place, and here I thought we were playing fair in love and war. From day one, she's throwing her weight around, lips curled in this permanent sneer every time our paths cross. I get it, lady, you think you're hot stuff. But around these parts, you gotta earn your stripes, not just show 'em. It wasn't so much what she said, it's what she did, or didn't do. You get me? It's the coffee she'd let go cold when an intern brought it to her, the sideways glances and snide digs at my expense, the way she'd talk shop as if she's got years on me. Alex sees it, I know he does, but what's he gonna do? It's his mom and sis firing at him with both barrels if he steps out of line. I land at work, and it's like walking into a storm. Cynthia's there, perched at her desk like she's the captain of a ship. But here's the kicker, she ain't sailing, she's sinking us, one bad decision at a time. Take last Tuesday. I'm in early, coffee in hand, trying to keep things afloat, and in struts Cynthia, dropping her purse with a thud that says, I'm in charge. She calls me into her office, right? Sits me down and starts in with this list of orders that'd choke a horse. Goldie, see these files? She waves some papers at me, scattered like confetti. Fix them. And I need it yesterday. I'm staring at this mess and thinking, lady, you've done lost your mind. But I bite my tongue, nod, and get to it. Fast forward a couple of hours, and I'm untangling her knots, right? That's when Mr. Jacobs calls. This guy's big league, think whales in a sea of fish. I can hear the tension a mile away. What's this crap Cynthia sent me, Goldie? He barks through the line. I asked for projections, not preschool scribbles. I'm juggling phones, trying to soothe him. Mr. Jacobs, I got this. Give me an hour. I hang up, track Cynthia down, and she's there painting her nails like she's at a spa. Cynthia, you gotta double check your work. Jacobs is ready to walk. She doesn't even glance up. Not my prob, Goldie. You handle it. So there I am, patching holes in a sinking ship while she's giving herself a manicure. I spend the whole day in damage control, but hey, I do love a challenge. And Jacobs? He's cool by the time we're done, thanks to yours truly. But it doesn't end there, oh no. You think she'd say thanks? As if. The next day, I catch wind of a meeting, right? Alex and Cynthia are at it, voices through the roof. I sidle up to the door, and who do I run into but Mary, listening in like it's the season finale of her favorite show. I'm about to step in, but she grips my arm, nails digging in like claws. Leave them, she hisses, all snake-like. This is family business. I wrench free, feeling her eyes on my back, and open the door. There's Cynthia, tears and all, playing up a storm. Alex, I'm trying, but Goldie's always undermining me. I'm floored. If her lies were dirt, we'd be buried alive. Alex is standing there, and I can see he's torn. He wants to believe his wife, but Sister Dearest is laying it on thick. I speak up. Alex, come on. You and I know that's a load of bull. Cynthia whips around, all drama. See? She points right at me, accusing like I'm the bad guy in some cheap novel. We're nose to nose, practically. You wanna explain, Jacobs, then? I challenge her, my voice level. Alex pipes up, tired lines around his eyes. Enough, both of you. I take a deep breath, ready to battle this out, but Mary barges in, cutting the air like a knife. Goldie's just jealous, Alex. You can see it. I'm about to say my piece, but it's like talking to a wall with those two, no, three. They've made up their minds, and I'm the villain in their fairy tale. It was a Tuesday, nothing out of the ordinary, until I got the call. Alex had a wreck. Some jerk ran a red and my world flipped upside down. The hospital, the blinking machines, Alex looking too still. It was like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I was in that hospital room, feeling like someone scooped out my insides. But here's the deal, which, trust me, made my heart sink even lower if that's possible. According to Alex's will, only a blood relative can take over the company. That should have been our kids, if we had any. Without them, it defaulted to his next of kin, which turned out to be his sister, Cynthia. So, just like that, I'm on the outside looking in. My husband isn't even cold, and already the wolves are circling. So while I'm drowning in grief, here come Mary and Cynthia, all pep and no sympathy, already divvying up the spoils before the battle's even done. Cynthia wastes no time throwing it in my face, right there in the hospital corridor. You see, Goldie, it's all clear-cut. Alex's will is as plain as day. Blood relatives only. With Alex. She trails off, like even saying coma would jinx her takeover. I could barely keep the snarl from my voice. So, what? You're dancing on his grave already? The man is fighting for his life. She just rolled her eyes, as cold as the sterile hospital walls. Business waits for no one, dear. It's unfortunate, yes, but we must think of the future. And as for you, she stepped closer. Well, you were just the wife. As I see it, you were never really part of the company, not like family. Mary nodded, her lips in a thin line. Cynthia's right. You have no children, Goldie. It was always going to be her. That was it. Their true colors, loud and clear. They didn't give a damn about Alex, only about what they could grab from his still warm hands. I walked away from them, my mind a chaos of grief and fury. I had to do something, but what? Every fiber of my being was woven into that company, into the life Alex and I had built. I wasn't just going to let them steal it. Days turned to weeks, and Alex didn't wake up. The company felt his absence like a missing limb, and Cynthia's reign didn't sit right with anyone, they all felt it too. One afternoon, Cynthia blocked my path by the copier, her arms folded over her chest. Still here, Goldie? I'd have thought you'd take the hint and leave with some dignity. I locked eyes with her, my back ramrod straight. Dignity? You wouldn't recognize it if it bit you. This isn't over, Cynthia. Her laugh was empty, but her eyes were sharp. Oh, it's over. It was over the minute that will was drafted. Alex's beloved wife or not, you're nothing to this company. Better start looking for a new job. I bit the inside of my cheek, tasting blood. We'll see. I turned on my heel and left her standing there. Her words were meant to cut deep, but they just fueled a fire in me. I wasn't about to roll over. The employees, they were with me, they knew where the heart of the company lay, and it wasn't with Cynthia. Day in and day out, I found myself in the same routine, pulling up a chair next to Alex's hospital bed after surviving another round of corporate warfare. The beep of the machines had become my unfortunate companion, the soundtrack to our one-sided conversations. Despite the coma, I'd tell Alex everything, hoping, praying he could hear me. Alex, you won't believe the circus your company's turned into, I'd start, my voice a low murmur, laced with fatigue. Your sister, she's taken over, bulldozed her way through the board, and camped out in your office like she's queen of the castle. She's axed Dan and Rita, just like that, because they wouldn't bow down. And the clients? They're jumping ship left and right. The Henderson deal, the one you worked months on, is dead in the water. They've had it with her. Each visit blurred into the next, the hospital walls absorbing my endless monologue, full of updates and frustrations. I'd scoff and curse, my tone growing bitter as I recounted the latest sabotage. And let's not get started on your mom, I continued, the bitterness in my voice growing sharper. She struts around the office now, tossing digs at me every chance she gets. When Alex wakes up, "You're out," she sniped at me yesterday. As if I haven't poured my soul into this company too. I felt the sting of tears threatening to spill, talking to Alex's motionless form. My husband, the man who promised to tackle life's ups and downs with me, was silent, caught in an endless sleep. Yet, I clung to the sliver of hope that someday he'd crack open his eyes and we'd really talk. Then it happened, so unexpectedly it knocked the breath out of me. In the middle of a particularly tough rant about how his sister's latest stunt might be the downfall of the entire business, Alex's eyes flicked open. They found mine, and the corners of his lips turned up in what I knew was meant to be a reassuring grin. It was a bittersweet smile that didn't quite reach the old spark that used to dance in his eyes, but it was more than enough. "Alex, you're back? Can you hear me?" My voice cracked, a mix of joy and disbelief. Before I could let the moment get the better of me, his hand, stronger than I'd felt in ages, clasped mine, and he gave a near imperceptible shake of his head. It was a silent plea to keep this moment between us. "You sly dog," I said, a laugh bubbling out of me in relief. "We're keeping this our little secret then, huh?" His smile said it all as he closed his eyes again, like this was just a brief break from his rest. But that grip on my hand didn't let up. I leaned in close. "All right, Your Highness, we'll play it your way. We'll let them think nothing's changed. But you and me, we're gonna turn this around. Wait and see." Leaving the hospital that night felt different. There was something like hope, or was it defiance, brewing inside me. I'd go to the office tomorrow, face Cynthia and his mom, and act like it was all the same, all while knowing Alex was coming back to me. Days turned into weeks, holding in the secret like clenching a fist around a live wire. That wire jolted out of my hands the day I got called to the lion's den, or what used to be Alex's place before Cynthia turned it into a sort of throne room for her ego. I walked into that office, a storm brewing in my chest. Cynthia was perched on the edge of Alex's desk like she was waiting for a parade in her honor. Mary lounged in a corner, looking all smug. "Time to hit the road," Cynthia tossed the words out without even looking directly at me. She had the termination papers already laid out like she was dealing cards at a shoddy casino. Mary piped up from her corner with that gravelly voice of hers, with Alex out of the picture, Cynthia's running the show. I was one twitch away from telling them where they could shove those papers, but I clenched my fists, instead, teeth grinding. And just like some Hollywood timing, the door swung open with a bang. There was Alex. He looked rough around the edges, but still standing, still breathing, still mine. Cynthia's face dropped like she just swallowed a bug. Alex didn't miss a beat. "Cynthia, get out of my chair." He spat the words out. His voice held less of its usual command, sure, but it had a bite. My eyes could barely peel away from him, but I had to see Cynthia's reaction. Her face twisted like she was chewing on glass. "What the, Alex? How are you?" Alex cut her off. "Standing? Talking? Surprise, sis. I'm not as gone as you hoped." Mary tried to back her daughter up. "This isn't happening. He's supposed to be drooling in a bed?" "Yeah, well, life's full of surprises." Alex snapped back, his eyes never leaving Cynthia. "Now, off my chair. We're going to have a real nice chat." Cynthia stood, stumbling a bit like her legs were made of wet noodles. "You can't just come back and what? Take back my company?" "Oh, I think I can," Alex interrupted, moving closer to his desk. I stepped forward, standing next to Alex. The two of us. United front. "Yeah, Cynthia." I pitched in. hurling people out on their asses is your specialty. Time to see how it feels, huh? Cynthia clenched her jaw so tight I could hear her teeth grind, while Mary was still trying to process the scene, looking like her software crashed. Alex, you're sick. I need my company back. You two, he waved a dismissive hand at them. You're done here. Cynthia's face was now the color of rotten tomatoes. I'll call the board. They won't stand for this. Alex looked over at me, a knowing glint in his eye. The board's in on it, aren't they, babe? I nodded, barely holding back a smile. Yep. Heard from them this morning. They're thrilled you're back. Even sent flowers. Cynthia still tried to have the last word. This isn't over, Alex. No, it is. For you. Alex's words cut her off, as short and final as a door slam. Cynthia's eyes flitted between Alex and me, the defeat finally sinking in as she grabbed her mom's arm. They left, not with the whiff of victory but with tails between their legs. Then, it was just us, alone in the room that had seen more drama than a daytime soap. You played it well, Alex. Had me scared too. I managed to say, my voice shaking off the last bits of worry and fear. He slumped into his chair, looked up at me with those eyes I fell for. Had to make it believable. Couldn't let them ruin everything we've built. I took his hand, a surge of pride washing over me. They didn't. And they won't. Alex's grip on my hand tightened, the fight still there. Time for some damage control. I shot back, more like a full-on fixer-upper. But together, we'll patch it up. Alex laughed, that familiar sound, but this time it was a little more victorious. I laughed too. It was over, this round at least. We were back in the game, Alex and I, ready to rebuild and face whatever came next. The office was humming like a kicked anthill when I walked in, fresh energy lighting up the place. With the dead weights cut off, Alex's office felt like a command center ready for a new mission. His recovery had flipped the switch on our future, and we were gunning the engine hard. I found Alex in the middle of the fray, barking orders to the team but with a grin that said he was back to his old self. Okay, team. Let's not waste any more time, he said. We've got a whole chunk of backlog to clear and new deals to chase. I leaned against the doorframe, watching my husband rally the troops. He caught sight of me and winked. Hey, you're part of this too. Roll up your sleeves. Chuckling, I walked over. Do I get a title for this, or just the usual Alex's better half? He chuckled. How about co-captain? Co-captain rang out well, so I nodded. Co-captain, reporting for duty. Turning to the team, Alex made introductions. Everyone, meet the co-captain of this ship. She steered it through the storm while I was out. The team clapped, and a few here's rolled through the group. It felt good, really good, like we were a family that had weathered the worst. As the team dispersed to get back to work, I sat down with Alex. So, what's the game plan? I asked, comfy in the swivel chair I had commandeered. We're shaking the tree, babe, ditching the bad apples that Cynthia brought in. Alex sounded pumped. There were spreadsheets all over his desk, plans scribbled on paper. I pointed to the papers. Hiring new blood? Yep. And we're putting money into developing our team. Training, seminars. No more throwing them in the deep end, he replied, highlighting a section that said team growth. I added, not just survival of the fittest, then. Alex shook his head. Nah. It's about thriving, not just surviving. We both knew the buzz in the office was more than just people being busy. It was hope, rebooted and recharged. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Ted, our old supplier. Hey, he's asking about the contracts. Should we bring him back in? Alex paused for a moment. Yeah, I think it's time. He was with us since the start. Let's not ditch loyalty. I nodded. Loyalty pays. I'll draft up something nice and comfy. The word comfy had Alex grinning. He knew that meant terms good enough to lock Ted in tightly. Just as I was about to get up and get to it, Alex grabbed my hand. Hey, I never got to say it properly, thank you. For not giving up when I was, well, you know. I squeezed his hand. No need for thanks. It's us against the world, right? Right? He confirmed, and we locked eyes in a moment of silent understanding, the kind that said we were a team, through thick and thin. My phone vibrated. It was Cynthia, rambling on about another blown job interview. They don't get it, you know? I'm leadership material, they want me to start from scratch. No way. Alex overheard and shook his head. She needs to start at the bottom, learn to crawl before she can boss around. I nodded. Right. But try telling her that. Cynthia wasn't the only family headache. Alex's mom was a constant buzz in our background, mad about the money tap getting twisted shut. She called again, and Alex glanced at the phone, letting it ring out. Your mom again? I asked, already knowing the answer. He sighed. Yep. She's been blowing up my phone since I stopped the cash flow. The memories of them assuming the worst when Alex was sick, bordering on vulture circling, stayed fresh. Alex finally picked up on the fifth ring, keeping it clipped. Mom, it's done. You've got to deal with it. The line got real loud, real quick. His mother's voice shrilled through, but Alex held his ground. When the call ended, he was tired but firm. No more free rides. I wrapped an arm around him. You okay? He nodded. Yeah, it's just draining. Let's not let them spoil tonight, okay? I suggested, wanting to steer clear of the drama for once. Agreed. Besides, he said, there's something better to talk about. His hint hung in the air, and I smiled. A baby? He smiled back, full of hope and love, his eyes lighting up at the possibility. Shifting gears from family drama to our own little unit felt like the right move. The notion of a kid, of starting fresh with our own small tribe, seemed to seal the deal on the new beginnings front. Turning off the lights, locking up the office that was once a battleground, we left for the day, hand in hand, a team thinking about adding a new member. Beneath the calm of making plans for the future, there's that undercurrent of family strain. But it's getting easier to let their calls go to voicemail, to ignore the bitter texts. We're not cold, just done. Done with the guilt trips, the scrambling to appease. It's about our little family now. And maybe, just maybe, this fresh start isn't just a new chapter in the business. Driving home, I sat with that thought, thumbing the little baby shoes we'd impulsively bought, a symbol of hope, of new life. So, about baby names, Alex started. I smothered a laugh. Already? He shrugged. Never too early. The streetlights flickered past, each one a beacon in the easy silence of our drive, each one guiding us away from the chaos and towards something better.